What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And this is going to be our first ever set review on the channel. We're going to be going through the entirety of the Lorwyn Eclipse set. We're going to be going card by card. We're going to be going in color order. So we're going to go going white, blue, black, red, green, the multicolored, the colorless cards, and then, of course, the lands at the very end here. We probably won't spend too much time on the lands because, honestly, like the rare land cycle, the other half of the shock lands are just like, S tier plus. Like, these are always going to be the best lands that they could ever print in standard. I think short of like there being like 9 tier 0 aggro decks, which obviously just doesn't even make any sense. Like those lands are just going to be the best cards in the set. So we're going to try to avoid really talking about those cards just because those are just absolute slam dunks. But again, we're going to be going in color order, and then we're going to be going over each individual card and just kind of my thoughts and like the kind of the potential things like that I could see for this. A lot of these cards I'm going to be seeing for the first time as well, so we're going to be experiencing a lot of this together. There are some cards that I am pretty interested in for constructed, and I'll kind of point those out as well as we run into them. Just ask that if you are watching this video that you leave a comment down below, maybe what cards you're excited for in Lorwyn Eclipse, and any suggestions in kind of this format. I wanted to do individual videos, but the timing and everything just didn't line up, and for whatever reason, makes more sense for me, at least for this set, to kind of record the whole thing in one shot rather than going, color by color. So if that's something you want in the future, please let me know in the comments down below. And of course, subscribe to the channel, as we are going to be doing set reviews. We do cover the modern standard format, everything to do with constructed Magic. We cover all the major tournaments going on, from the Spotlight Series to the Pro Tour and the World Championship, etc., and just some other fun videos as well. So be sure to check those out. We also post shorts as well if that is something that you're into. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it. Please consider supporting the channel. And now let's get into this decently long set review. I think there's like 279 cards. I know it says 408, but it also gives like these other versions of these cards. So again, let's not waste any more time, and we'll start with Adept Water Shaper, a 2 and a white 3/4 Merfolk Cleric that says other tap creatures you control have indestructible. Now, on the very surface of this card, obviously the easiest way to tap your creatures is by attacking with them. This can kind of help you in kind of those board stall situations where your opponent really can't attack you and you can't really attack your opponent, because there's going to be a lot of trades that maybe don't really favor one player or the other, unless obviously there's some kind of combat tricks involved. But with Adept Water Shaper, in those situations, it does make it better for you to kind of attack into your opponent, especially if you're not just going to die on the crackback. Maybe your opponent is forced to kind of block with some of their creatures, and they have to find ways to pump their creatures to survive combat against whatever it is they're blocking, or maybe make some suboptimal blocks. Also, with the fact that Convoke is also in this Lorwyn Eclipse set, and of course there are other ways to just tap your creatures in, like when it comes to crewing and things like that. That's also a way that you could instant speed tap your creatures, give them indestructible to have them survive a kill spell or some kind of burn spell of that nature. As far as constructed, because usually the rares and mythics are, the rares kind of round out some of the archetypes in limited, but also end up seeing play in constructed, and then the mythics are more constructed in mind and less so than limited. This card obviously is going to hinge on the fact that maybe some kind of Merfolk aggro strategy is prevalent in the format, I think. I don't know how good, Kithkin aggro is going to be, or how good Merfolk is going to be, because those would be the main white archetypes that you'd want to play a card like this in. So I don't really see this card finding a home necessarily in constructed, but as far as what it is able to do, there are a lot of ways to kind of get there and to get the indestructibility when you want it on this card. So, that's pretty neat there. Next, we have Ajani Outland Chaperone, is 1 and 2 white pips for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. +1, you create a 1/1 green-white Kithkin creature token. -2, you deal 4 damage to target tap creature. And -8, you look at the top X cards of your library. X is your life total. You may put any number of non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Now, white has a lot of good, 3 or less non-land effects that can act as removal. There are, of course, plenty. There's even a card in the set that you can, that's basically like Collected Company for the non-creature, like non-land permanents and stuff. So like a Johnny allowing you to look at even more cards and put any number of them if you're able to get to that -8. Having a steady stream of 1/1s is a way to kind of protect this card while also just getting to -2 to get rid of a decent sized creature as well. This Planeswalker does feel weak. I mean, to be fair, I think you have to be a really strong Planeswalker to see playing Constructed now, just because like the creatures and the removal spells have just completely caught up and possibly even surpassed a lot of like the Planeswalkers and stuff that we see. I mean, Kaito isn't even a Planeswalker that, obviously sees play in like Dimir midrange, but isn't a Planeswalker that isn't like ubiquitous. I think Planeswalkers are more niches now instead of just in general being very good game pieces. And, if there's some good creature strategies out there people are playing, making a 1/1 every single turn, and then potentially finding ways to, use this ultimate ability to maybe clear the path for your opponents. Heck, even get an Adept Water Shaper to make sure that your creatures end up surviving combat a lot easier. There's like plenty of things that this card can do. Just getting to that -8 is going to be a pretty high cost, and there are some good answers for Planeswalkers nowadays. And I think just like playing this and making a few 1/1s isn't going to be the most impactful thing. And especially if you're able to, I think this is going to be better served as killing a creature and then making a few 1/1s while it probably eats up some damage as well and helps you win some races. But I don't see this being a super insane Planeswalker. I think it's going to fit a role nicely, but the art on this is pretty banger, if I do say so myself here. Next, we have Appeal to Irdu, and I'm going to take absolutely butchering that card. It's a 3 and a white. For an instant, it has Convoke, so you can tap your creatures to either pay 1 generic or whatever the color of the creature is. Can also pay for the color of the card. So you could essentially pay 0 mana for this, and you can give 1 or 2 target creatures each +2/+1 until end of turn. This is kind of what I was talking about, where you could find ways to tap your creatures. But this does seem like a very good defensive spell, on top of, just being kind of a fine pump spell when you need it to be, just to kind of hurry up and close out games. A lot of these cards are just going to really find homes in Limited more so than Constructed. Constructed doesn't really want to play pump spells. Even a lot of the aggro decks that play pump spells, you had to be very, very powerful, and this just doesn't read very powerful. Of course, there's a common as well, so it's just more for the limited environment. But I think is a pretty solid pump spell. You're definitely going to blow somebody out, being able to, block, and then tap your creatures and have 2 of them survive combat, or to 2 eat your opponent's creatures and then be able to untap and kind of put them on the back foot, as it were. But, nice solid card overall. Bark of Doran, a 2-mana artifact equipment where the equipped creature gets +1 or +0/+1, and as long as the equipped creature's toughness is greater than its power, it assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, and equips for 1. Of course, this is reminiscent of just Doran, the Siege Tower from way back in the original Lorwyn, where your creatures would assign damage by their toughness rather than their power. And of course, this gives the creature, as long as its power is greater, as long as its toughness is greater than its power. So even if this bumps up, Brigid, who we're going to see here in a second, ends up getting equipped with this card. It just ends up being a 3/3. So definitely, if you're invested more into the toughness matters thing, this is especially a way that you could give this to non-wall creatures and be able to attack and assign damage that way. But also just nice putting it on just a really big creature, and essentially having a super cheap 8/8 creature on essentially back to play defense can gum up a ground very nicely. On top, it assigns combat damage though, so it doesn't actually just to assign damage. So you couldn't have a wall equip this and then have the wall fight. It's just not going to end up dealing any damage, unfortunately. But just a fine equipment to play. Nothing absolutely insane unless you're able to just find something with a huge toughness that you want to equip this to and then be able to bash your opponent over the head with. Brigid Klashin's Heart, I'm gonna butcher that word throughout the entirety of this video anytime it comes up, but is a 3-mana 3/2 for 2 and a white. you get whenever this creature enters or transforms into Brigid Clayton's Heart, you make a 1/1 green and white Kithkin, and at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a green. If you do, you transform Brigid. So this is like one of the handful of cards, maybe there's probably more than that, that you can either pay, you know, either color. So you pay green, you flip to the other side, and it ends up being green. You pay a white, you get to flip it back to this front side at the beginning of your first main phase. So on the front side, whenever this enters or it transforms into it, you end up making a 1/1. And then on the back side, you can tap to add X green or X white mana, where X is the number of creatures you control. So this is a creature that can potentially generate a ton of mana and also kind of feed into itself, albeit very slowly over time, because if you like lose all your creatures except for this, you're only going to generate actually you won't generate any mana because it is other creatures. So this is just slightly weak because it's not even necessarily a mana dork on the other side. So like it takes a little bit more to kind of get that mana back from flipping it. But this is kind of nice that you can play this. It ends up making, you know, 4 power and 3 toughness across 2 bodies. And then on the next turn, you're able to flip this over and generate a decent amount of mana and be able to, you know, essentially get the 1 mana back that you use to flip Brigid if you're able to play a few more creatures and those creatures end up surviving when you get to the backside to end up playing a bigger creature. So pretty solid. As far as like a constructed card, again, I just don't know how relevant making 1/1s is going to end up being. Just thinking of like some of the some of the top decks in the format currently. I mean, like if this was just probably green and it made tokens on the front, you know, maybe you would end up being something like Ouroboros decks would end up getting a little bit more out of it. Obviously, I don't know if playing white over blue is going to end up being more important. But just making 1/1s in a format where, you know, something like the Is It Lessons deck just has a main deck, deal 1 to each creature, and then also, you know, playing like Pyroclasms and things like that. You know, I don't know how well that's going to end up translating, but, you know, super neat card. I hope that like there's some kind of like mono white aggro deck to kind of bring back just kind of change the flavor of like aggro decks outside of, you know, just being just the straight red decks. And the altar on this too, I think is pretty neat as well. Burden Stoneback, a 1 white 4/4. This creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. And you pay 1 and a white, and you remove a -1/-1 counter from this. Target creature you control gains indestructible until your turn. Only activate as a sorcery. So this is incredibly weak, just for the fact that you can only activate the ability as a sorcery. I mean, you would rather use this to kind of protect your creature, so you are using this more proactively to, you know, make your big creature indestructible and kind of force your opponent to a chump block, maybe instead of trading off like 2 or possibly 3 creatures. But even in those scenarios, you might take a trade for like 3 creatures a lot of the time, just because that it does end up clearing up the board quite a bit. So I think this card feels pretty weak. Obviously, being a high toughness creature, and being able to remove the counters from it means that it's a fine like blight target to like to activate this and take counters off of it, especially when you just have extra mana lying around. But really, outside of that, I don't see this being all that great, and I wouldn't be surprised if come limited time, like this card is not necessarily the best, like kind of maybe like filler to like the bottom of like bottom being playable. Next, Champion of the Klachin, 3 and a white, 4/5 flash. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you behold a Kithkin and exile it. So you exile a Kithkin you control or a Kithkin card in your hand. Other Kithkin you control get +1/+1, and when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exile card to its owner's hand. So, like with these Champion cards, you can kind of, we'll call it gaming the system, where you can like play it, and then if you blink it, you end up getting the card that you beholded back into your hand, and then you don't have like that creature just waiting in exile, and you still get the creature around. But you know, for an effect like this, 4 mana 4/5 is absolutely massive, and just being able to behold like one of your Kithkin or whatever, I mean, they're super cheap, so you don't necessarily mind doing it. And then, like, when this creature leaves the battlefield, you end up getting the card back anyway. But, you know, this could potentially just put a lot of power into play, not only with the Anthem effect, but just being a 4/5 itself. So I think it's just a very solid champion. Again, if you're just, like, in the mono white, like Kithkin. I kind of wish it was creatures. Obviously, that'd be the way that would make it better. But to fit the theme being like a champion or whatever. It has to kind of fit into one of the main creature types here. So, you know, just overall, I think a very solid card. Again, 4 mana for like this kind of Lord effect, probably a little too much for constructed, but for limited, this is fine. We have the Klatchin Festival. Gee, I'm gonna murder this so hard. 2 mana, or 2 and a white for Kindred Enchantment Kithkin. When this enchantment enters, you create 2 1/1 green-white creature token, or Kithkin creature tokens, and then you can pay 5 mana, 4 and a white to create a 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature token. So I think this might actually be early, like one of my favorite like uncommons. Before we get to any other ones, this might be one of my favorite uncommons. Like 3 mana to make 2 1/1 creatures, I'm totally fine with. And then being able to have like a repeatable way of making more 1/1s when you need to. Obviously, there's there's like specifically a rare enchantment in the set that does give your creatures +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures that have entered the battlefield this turn. So, kind of like in conjunction with both of these, like this is a fine card to, get a decent buff. I mean, you have like a champion to follow this up with. You can even you exile Kithkin you control, so that means you can exile this festival with the champion, and then if the champion leaves, then you just have the ability to play this and make 2 more 1/1s, which, is totally fine, honestly, and you're obviously more than fine with this sticking around on the battlefield. So I actually really like this card. Constructed wise, whatever, but for limited, I'm a pretty big fan of this card. Next, we have Crib Swap. This is, I believe, a reprint. So it's a Kindred instant shapeshifter. It's every creature type, and you exile target creature. Its controller makes a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. This could potentially be a card that sees play in Constructed. Most decks, I believe, don't really care about creature types. We don't see, really elves seeing any play, or goblins or whatever. So, like, giving them a 1/1 shapeshifter token that's going to have every creature type isn't going to be the most impactful. On top of, again, it being a 1/1 and in a format where, we see like Eros demonstration, stuff like that, seeing main deck play. And, of course, limited, this is going to be a little bit more dangerous in limited, just because, again, there are, a lot of things that care about other things that are creature types. But, just a really good removal spell. Like, you're going to be fine giving your opponent, if you exile their champion, with the Crib Swap, like, you're totally fine with that. Sure, they get their card back, but, the champion is going to do a lot more damage than the 1/1 with the potential, like, creature type capabilities. Curious Colossus is a 7 mana, 7/7, so 5 and 2 white, giant warrior. When this creature enters, each creature target opponent controls loses all abilities, becomes a coward in addition to its other types, as base power, toughness 1/1. Obviously, this ends up being a humility on a creature. I believe that each creature, your opponent, like, you just target opponent. So I think that at the time, it just makes them all 1/1s, that it doesn't actually keep them as 1/1. Someone can correct me on that, but definitely just getting to turn all your opponent's creatures into 1/1s, especially this being 7 mana, especially in like limited, this is going to come down and your opponent's going to have their board full of creatures, and this is going to immediately end a stalemate, because even if your opponent has like 6 or 7 like big creatures on the side of the board, you turn them all into 1/1s and you're able to get in with like 2 2s and 3 3s. Just even in that case, your opponent's going to have to trade off tons of their board to kind of get through this. And a 7/7 is absolutely massive as well. So this is going to be a pretty big deal, I would say, in limited. And it's especially, too, they lose their creature types. Oh, they become a coward in addition to their other types. So a little bit worse there, but I guess can't be mad. This is just, I think, a very solid card, and you're going to be, I would say, like, relatively happy if you open this up in limited. Constructed-wise, I don't think making things into base power toughness 1/1, especially when the Ouroboros decks kind of exist. So this would have to be something that you'd have to find a way to take away the effect of the Ouroboros, but even then, like, you're just putting a bunch of counters on your creatures. This probably isn't going to do as much in Constructed. Cool alternate art, though, and like the flavor text on this one too. She stepped and they screamed, the poor little mites, for they've never seen a more frightening sight. The bigs and the littles is just kind of funny to me. All right, I'm gonna look at the fancy one. Iridu, Carrier of Dawn, is a 3 and 2 white for a 5/5 flying lifelink legendary creature elemental god. Creature spells you control, or creature spells you cast have Convoke, and then you can pay a black mana, and if you do, you transform Carrier of Dawn into Isilu, Carrier of Twilight. So this is a 5/5 flying lifelink on the backside. Each other non-token creature you control has Persist. So how Persist ends up working is that if your creature would, I believe Persist is if it dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter, as long as it didn't have a -1/-1 counter on it. So this is a way that you can, give your creature spells Convoke, which means that you can kind of snowball. You can use those tokens that you generate to essentially make mana to like dump your handful of creatures, and then you have it on the other side. You're going to have essentially a way to protect them from a wrath. Obviously, like this creature is going to end up going away, but if you have a board full of 8, 9, 10 creatures and your opponent ends up board wiping after you've already hit them with them, well then for the cost of this card, you've essentially got to keep your board around. So it kind of gives you a layer of protection there. Again, 5 mana is a lot for standard, and I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze here, so I don't know if Iridu would actually see any meaningful play in standard. But if you're able to kind of play like a bigger white, like being able to play this and then go and immediately play Curious Colossus, if you're able to make kind of enough tokens, is going to end up working out well in your favor, and then giving your giving each other non-token creature you control Persist. Obviously, the token generation is going to kind of go against this, but overall, I think very solid. Like 5 mana, 5/5 like flying lifelink is totally fine in my book. Encumbered Regery is a 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 5/4 Merfolk Soldier that enters with 3 -1/-1 counters on this. When this creature becomes tapped, while it has a -1/-1 counter on it, you remove a -1/-1 counter from it. So, obviously, you play this, it ends up being a 2 mana, 2/1. You attack with it, it becomes a 3/2, or if you're able to pay for a Convoke spell, it'll become a 3/2, then a 4/3, and then go up to a 5/4. It's probably going to be pretty good, I would imagine, especially if you can just be on the play and get this out very early. Again, another high toughness creature with a pretty clear way of getting -1/-1 counters taken off of it. It being a 4/3 isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world either. So if you're able to, get this up to a 5/4, like blight onto it to maybe get rid of your opponent's creature or get an extra effect from your card, and then being able to remove that counter and be attacking with a 5/4, to me I think is going to be pretty good. I think that a lot of these creatures, especially too like in Merfolk, they have like a lot of ways of finding ways to be unblockable. So getting to attack with this and it potentially being like a 6 or 7 power Merfolk is going to be pretty nice as well. So I do kind of like this card for the limited format. Evershriek's Gift, a 1 mana aura. It's an enchant creature. An enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and flying, and you can pay 1 and a white, blight to return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Activate only as a sorcery. So this is kind of nice here. Their first encounter was luck. Their bonds was fate. That's pretty neat. So I really do like this kind of enchantment. We've seen something like this, like Sentinel's Eyes in the Theros Beyond Death set with Sentinel's Eyes, where you could exile cards from your graveyard to escape it and be able to put it onto your creature. This Blight 2, so essentially you could be trading creatures to get this kind of enchantment back, but giving a creature +1/+0 and flying, being evasive, especially in limited formats, is really nice. I don't think there's really a Boggles type strategy that's seeing play in standard currently. Nor are you getting any value from picking this up and down. So while it's probably just kind of an underwhelming enchantment, I do just kind of personally like how this usually ends up playing out. Even you can give outside of even giving a big creature flying with this, so it's having a small annoying creature, very early on that's going to get in and deal damage. Even putting it on the Encumbered Regery, and just being able to hit your opponent and being able to make sure that you're going to be able to attack enough times to get the minus counters off your creature. And again, being on a decent sized creature that is going to get in damage too is something that I really like. Flock Imposter is a 2 and a white for a 2/2 shapeshifter changeling, so it's every creature type. Flash, flying, this creature enters, return up to one other target creature you control to its owner's hand. Obviously, this is like a way you can protect your creatures, get annoying enchantments off of them. You know, of course, we see kind of like the arrest and like pacifism type effects, and of course those have evolved over time, but just being able to do that, double up on an ETB for a creature, I think this is just very solid. And again, being in every creature type, it's going to benefit from some of the other just random, you know, things that care about being certain creature types. So just overall, I think a very solid card. Gallant Foul Knight, a 3 and a white Kithkin Knight. It's a 3/4. When this creature enters, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Kithkin creature you control also gain first strike till end of turn. So this seems like a pretty neat, like, top end kind of card. I mean, just being able to, you know, make, you know, we talked about the Klatchen, you know, enchantment where you're going to make 2 1/1s. And the next turn you're going to be able to attack with, you know, with at least 2 2/1s that have first strike. You know, obviously this is going to get a lot better the more you're able to build into like the Kithkin archetype and be able to put more creatures out and play. You know, so this is like a card that you're kind of fine with playing on curve, but you're also fine with like kind of building out a board and then playing this out, and just being able to make combat very hard for your opponent. First strike is a very tricky keyword, I think in general, but especially in limited. First strike feels especially brutal. So I mean, I think this card is just very solid for what it's going to be, and obviously constructed, it's going to see next to no play. Gold Meadow Nomad, 1 white for a 1/2. Exile this card from your graveyard to create a 1/1 Kithkin token. Activate only as a sorcery. Just another fine like Kithkin card. Being a 1-mana 1/2, you know, with a relevant creature type in the set, and then being able to trade it in for a 1/1 after it's died, you know, sign me up. Like, this is just, I think this is a fine card. You know, nothing crazy, nothing that's going to absolutely, like, blow your socks off or anything like that, but, you know, just a nice card. Keep Out, a 2-mana instant, 1 and a white. You choose one, you deal 4 damage to target tap creature, or you destroy target enchantment. I mean, 2 mana, deal 4 damage to target tap creature. Totally fine. We've seen plenty of, like, 4 toughness creatures already just in white that we're totally fine kind of beating up on. And then being able to destroy enchantments as well, I mean, is just kind of like fine flexibility on a removal spell that you're probably already playing anyway. Kin Binding is a 3 and 2 white for a creature, or for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures that have entered the battlefield on your controller's turn. And then being in combat on your turn, you make a 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature token. So just very solid. You're going to give your creatures at minimum +1/+1 when you go to combat. And of course, all these other cards that find ways to continue to make 1/1 creature tokens, or that care about, you know, like they enter the battlefield, they end up generating tokens, whatever. Like, this is a totally fine finisher for a deck that wants to go completely wide, and, you know, can save, can find a turn where they can, you know, make 2 or 3 tokens and then make 1 off of the binding, and then give all their creatures like +4/+4, and, you know, just bash and either kill your opponent outright, or, you know, they end up essentially trading in their whole board, and, you know, they're at the point where they need a sweeper, basically. So this can be potentially game ending. Especially in limited, it could potentially be game ending. Standard, again, this is a 5-mana enchantment that, you know, unless you're playing this and then also following it up with like finding a way to have a bunch of creatures come back into play, you know, just giving your creatures +1/+1 for that turn. And then, of course, like the 1/1 body itself just isn't going to actually cut it. So, you know, constructed wise, it's going to be a very poor card, but limited, you know, I could see this being an absolute, this could just be game winning on its own. Next we go to Kinsbale Aspirant, a 1 mana or 1 white for a 2/1 Kithkin Citizen. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you behold a Kithkin or pay 2. To behold a Kithkin, you choose a Kithkin you control or reveal a Kithkin card from your hand. And then whenever another creature you control enters, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is just a very aggressive creature. You know, you potentially show your opponent your 2-drop that you're going to play that turn, and on the next turn, and you're going to end up having a 3/2 that you're going to be able to attack with on the next turn. And then again, potentially other creatures entering the battlefield are going to cause this creature to grow. So this could be a creature that sees some constructive play. Again, if there's going to be some kind of Kithkin aggro deck, it probably has to start with Kinsbale Aspirant, just being a creature that could potentially get in for tons and tons of damage very early on. And just being a 1-mana 2/1 is also like not the worst thing in the world either. Just the 1 toughness is going to be the worst thing for it. Kinscare Sentry, a 2-mana 2/2 first strike lifelink Kithkin Soldier. Whenever this creature attacks, you may put a creature card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, where X is the number of attacking creatures you control. Now, obviously, this can be pretty nuts. Like, this is probably going to fit more into like some kind of red-white strategy, and this is something I could see, seeing play past, something like Standard. This kind of effect can be very powerful. Just being able to, play a 1-mana creature into finding a way to really give your creatures, like, hey, even if it's like, play my 3rd land, play a 3-mana creature, attack with 2 creatures, or even like, a haste 3-mana creature and put another 3-mana creature into play. You got 6 mana value worth of cards on turn 3 just from this Sentry. And, first strike again just is a very annoying thing to deal with. So if you're putting in, creatures that end up giving a boost to your creature's power, it's going to make the Kinscare Sentry, essentially unbeatable in combat. Is going to be a very hard card to actually deal with. So, this is a creature and probably one of the white cards in the set that I'm the most excited for Constructed, just because the potential is definitely there. It's just if there's going to be enough things that we can kind of load up into this thing where we have enough things that we could play like a 3-mana haste creature that's going to do something relevant, that's also going to allow us to play another powerful like 3-mana creature with a good ETB. So, I mean, again, this is probably the most excited I am for any of the white cards in the set. Kith Keeper, a 7-mana 3/3 elemental with Vivid. When this creature enters, you create X 1/1 green and white Kithkins, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Then you tap 3 untapped creatures you control, and this creature gets +3/+0 and gains flying until end of turn. So obviously you want to be playing as many colors as possible, and this is another creature that you're kind of fine with, like blinking and just giving kind of like Cloud Goat Ranger vibes, where you just tap creatures to kind of give this creature a buff and flying. So, this card of itself could end games very quickly, and is a card that you're going to want to build, into like the 3 and 4 color decks as well. And there's a lot of like hybrid costed cards, so this isn't like insanely crazy. Like, you could be playing like red white and you could end up getting blue and black just off the red and white cards, so, or however that goes. So you are able to make a decent amount of things, and this is like probably a fine curve topper if you're going to be able to put potentially 6 or 7 power across multiple bodies on a turn for this. Liminal Hold, a 4-mana enchantment. When this enchantment enters, you exile up to 1 target non-land permanent opponent controls. Until this enchantment leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life. Just a very solid removal spell, going to gain you a little bit of life. Potentially worse than something like Oblivion Ring or like Banishing Light. But, the life is kind of relevant. Kind of in a way, like a Faith's Fetters kind of removal spell. So, for some of the older players out there. Meander's Guide, a 2 and a white for a 3/2 Merfolk Scout. When this creature enters, you may tap another untapped Merfolk you control. When you do, return target creature of mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your battlefield. Wait, so when this creature attacks, okay, yeah. So, I mean, that's actually insane. I think there's a lot of good, decent, I'm going to say a lot of decent Merfolk at 3 or less mana, so you can kind of play into the, kindred aspect of these creatures. But also just being able to return creatures mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Of course, there are tons of very efficient creatures that exist in the format, and if it comes to attacking with this and then tapping like another creature to get back a very powerful 3-mana spell, this is going to be or 3-mana creature, excuse me, then this is going to end up working out pretty nicely. On top of the fact too that there's ways to kind of protect these tap creatures, as we've seen in this set already. So you can really find ways to quote-unquote abuse this kind of effect. As far as Constructed, probably not seeing really any play, because being able to play this and then it not do anything and then having to attack and then also tap one of your creatures is going to be a pretty tall order. But, you know, if you're already playing into the Merfolk archetype, then you're probably fine with probably like one of these cards, because then you're able just to kind of get a ton of value off of it. If you're able to, you know, return at least one creature, and then anything more past that, you're feeling pretty good. Moonlit Lamenter, a 2 and a white for a Tree Folk Cleric. It's 2/5. It enters with a -1/-1 counter on it. You remove a counter from this creature and you draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, this is a card that I want to blight over and over and over and over again, because like a 3-mana 1/4 isn't very exciting, but being able to, you know, on your next turn, you know, you're going to be up to 4 mana. You're going to go down to 2 mana, but you're going to end up getting to draw a card, and you're going to have a 2/5 on the battlefield that's going to come up the ground very nicely. And again, just another creature that you're fine with putting, you know, with blighting, because you're going to be able to remove those counters on, you know, from this thing and be able to remove multiple at a time. While also getting to draw cards on top of it too. So you're going to be spending spells and getting extra value from blighting your own spells and your own creatures, while then also getting to draw cards off this. I think this is going to be a great, to me, it's probably a great limited card. Literally, you stable draw a card on any of these things, I'm going to absolutely love them. And I like me some Moonlit Lamenter. Morningtide's Light, a 3 and a white sorcery. Exile any number of target creatures. At the beginning of the next end step, return those creatures to the battlefield tapped on their owner's control. Until your next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you, and you exile Morningtide's Light. Now, obviously, you can exile your creatures, you can exile your opponent creatures, and then at the beginning of the next end step, which more than likely is going to be on your own end step, you return them to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control. So if your opponent takes one of your creatures, you're able to give them right back. Just make sure that if you took one of your opponent's creatures, do not exile it, because then you will end up giving it back to your opponent. Until your next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. Now, obviously, if you have some really good ETBs, you're more than fine with kind of getting rid of these, or if your opponent's creatures have like counters on them, then these are like a way that you can reset counters, and then also have like a fog effect as well. So, you know, probably not seeing much constructed play. You know, this is like something decent against like the Ouroboros decks, but really after a certain point, when they've already, you know, triggered Ouroboros like 2 or 3 times, like there's a good chance that they probably just end up killing you anyway, and you're looking for a sweeper at 4 mana rather than just blinking everything out and then giving it back to them anyway, unless you have some way of, you know, permanently exiling those creatures, which I'm sure that there's probably some way of doing it. That I'm not thinking of in standard, but I'm sure there's a card out there that is going to, like, something like Banisher, not Banishing Priest. There's like a 2 mana flash creature that if a creature enters the battlefield from anywhere other than being cast, then it gets exiled. So like that's a way that you can make this like a wrath of some sort, and then of course on you know, the bonus of being a fog effect as well. But you know, in general, without some help, this card is just kind of meh at best. Personify. 1 and a white instant, you exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. You create a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. Fine. This is pretty good. So you exile a creature you control. This is like a way that you can mess with your own warp creatures. You know, like Quantum Riddler is a card that, you know, there's like a 1 mana way of doing it, but being in, you know, blue-white, you know, there's a lot of good white cards currently in standard. So just getting to kind of blink your own thing and then making a 1/1's like kind of fine, you know, whatever. So if you're able to, you know, again, play like one of these champion cards in the set, and you're able to blank it with a Personify, you're able to get the card that you beholded back from the champion, and then also get another you know, creature that's going to care about, you know, whatever creature type things that you have going on. So this is a solid card. Protective Response, destroy target attacking or blocking creature for 3 mana, but you can convoke it as well. Another great removal spell. I mean, just being able to, again, you know, potentially set up scenarios where your opponent is able, you know, feeling bold enough to make an attack, you end up blocking, they end up playing like a pump spell or something like that, and then you're able to convoke, tap your creatures, and, you know, end up beating their creature, make some other trades in combat, and you end up decently ahead, I would say. But also, again, just the fact that this could just be a free counter spell, could potentially just be a free removal spell as well, is totally fine, because then you can just tap out to play a creature, and maybe you make some tokens, and your opponent's not really, you know, any of the wiser of, you know, potentially having their attacking or blocking creature blown up. Furic Strike, 2 and a white. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may blight 2, which means you put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature you control. You choose one. If the additional cost was paid, choose both instead. You can destroy an artifact or enchantment and destroy a target creature with mana value 3 or greater. Again, just like another really good removal spell. There's so far we've only went through one color, but there are a lot of good creatures that you can just kind of blight onto that you'd be fine with getting a little extra, that give you the ability to get extra value off of them, like this Moonlit Lamentor. So just a solid like, potential removal spell, and kind of a big blowout as well. Reluctant Dawn Guard, 2 and a white for a 4/4. This enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. Whenever another creature you control enters, while this creature has a -1/-1 counter, you remove a -1/-1 counter from this creature. So I think having creatures that have multiple, have ways that you could remove multiple counters off of it very easily, make it very attractive blight targets. I think this is another creature that you can quick remove the counters off of it just by naturally playing out the game, and then also removing those counters naturally, and then also being willing to blight to get to do additional things with your spells, and then again, just playing the game, you're going to remove those counters off of it. Just a very solid common. Reese the Evermore, a 1 and a white elf warrior. It's a 2/2 with flash. Another creature you control gains persistence until end turn. That's when it dies. If it had no -1/-1 counters on it, you return it with a -1/-1 counter. You can pay a white and tap it and remove any number of counters from target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. So unfortunately, only when this enters are you going to give a thing persist, but you're able to ideally find a way to save it from a removal spell, and then Reese is going to be able to remove that counter from it. It can also do like interesting things with, again, some of these creatures that have minus counters on them, where you're able to put those counters on them, and Reese is just going to turbo take those counters off and have it ready to go for the next time that you're in need of blighting something to kind of get additional value. So just, I think, a very nice card. I also have a soft spot for Reese personally, as when I was a filthy commander player back in the day, I play like the Reese the Redeemed. But I like this card. I can get behind it in some ways. River Guard's Reflexes, a 1 and a white. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains first strike until end of turn. Untap it. So this is like one of the ways that you could just untap a creature, like that Merfolk we looked at earlier, where you could tap it to remove remove a -1/-1 counter from it. If it becomes tapped, this is like a way that you can attack with it, then untap, do whatever. First strike again is a crazy thing to have, especially on a pump spell as well. So 2 mana for this, I think, is going to be a pretty good defensive spell, and also a decent aggressive spell as well. Shore Lurker, 3 and a white, flying. When this creature enters, surveil 1. Just a very solid body, and a really nice ETB. Something that you're fine with. You're kind of fine with like blinking and getting extra value from. Like surveil 1, in limited does mean something. Slumbering Walker, 3 and 2 white, is creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. So starts out as a 4/7, but ends up being a 2/5 really when it enters. When at the beginning of your end step, you may remove a counter from this creature. When you do, return target creature with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. There's ways that you can get around this that end up getting creatures that are technically bigger than 2 power. We have like clones where they're all like 0/0s in your graveyard and they don't do anything until they enter the battlefield. There's also creatures that end up getting +1/+1 counters on them when you put them into play. So like Slumbering Walker does have ways of getting some, pretty powerful, like 2 power or less things from your graveyard to the battlefield. How many of those things are in standard? Probably not enough to actually make this card worth playing it and hoping that you make it to your end step with this 5 toughness creature. But, there is the potential here to do some crazy things if you're willing to put in the work. Spiral into Solitude, 1 and a white, enchant creature cannot attack or block, and then you pay 1 and a white, blight 1, and you sacrifice this aura, you exile the enchanted creature. So you have to put a -1/-1 counter on one of your own creatures and sacrifice this, and you get rid of the creature that is on the battlefield. Again, if you have things, that care about having the counters on them, that can remove them, this is going to be an even better removal spell, because you're going to actively want to activate this ability rather than just having Spiral into Solitude be more of a pacifism. Sun-Dappled Celebrant, a 6 mana 5/6 with Convoke and has Vigilance. You know, just, again, another, like, decently solid creature that you can probably play pretty early on if you're doing some kind of, like, the token thing. You know, playing a 5/6 is pretty big, and getting to play offense and defense on top of that is really nice. Thoughtweft, Imbuer, 4 mana, 3 and a white for an 0/5. When this creature you control attacks alone, it gets +X/+X, where X is the number of Kithkin you control. So, this is, like, a creature that you could send into some pretty gummed up battlefields if you have decent enough creatures. If you're able to even put, like, the flying enchantment that we looked at earlier on it, you know, there's a potential that you could just hit your opponent for massive amounts of damage while also just being able to leave creatures back to block. Timid Shieldbearer, 1 and a white for a 2/2. Creature control get +1/+1 until end turn. We've seen this quite a few times. It ends up being good, you know, in some of those, in a lot of situations. Just being able to give, you know, a temporary anthem to your creatures is not bad. Tributary Vaulter, 2 and a white, 1/3 flying creature. When this creature becomes tapped, another target merfolk you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So this is like an invasive creature that's going to be able to make your other creatures very powerful, or is going to make them, make them more powerful, I guess. So just solid. Wander Brine Preacher, 1 and a white for a 2/2. When this creature comes tapped, you gain 2 life. This is a creature that is going to kind of help you in certain racing situations. If you're able to, like, tap it outside of being able to attack with it, you know, is going to be pretty nice. And, you know, of course, we saw another creature that can attack and then tap one of your other creatures to do a thing. So then you can do the thing with this. Pretty neat. Wander Brine Trapper, 1 white for a 2/1. You pay 1 and tap it, and tap another untapped creature you control, and you tap target creature that opponent controls. Obviously, this is a little bit worse. Obviously, there's some tap synergies. Of course, like when this creature becomes tapped, you get +2/+0 to a merfolk, and then this gains you 2 life. So you can get some additional value from doing this, and then also tapping a creature, setting up a turn where you can just attack your opponent with everything that you got. Last card of the white cards. I feel like we've actually been this for a while. Winnowing, 4 and double white for a convoke spell. For each player, you choose a creature that player controls. Then each player sacrifices all other creatures they control that don't share a creature type with the chosen creature they control. So, your opponent, ideally, you could choose, like, a creature with, like, a very niche type that your opponent has, that you can then blow up all their creatures while also choosing a creature you control that ends up having all that has, like, every creature type, and then you end up saving your creatures. So this is, like, definitely a thing where, like, if you have, like, a changeling in play, it's like, okay, I'm going to target this and all my creatures are going to survive, and this ends up being a 1 mana, or, you know, a one-sided wrath, which is really nice. Moving on to the blue cards. If you're this is crazy. I can't believe I decided to do this. We're going to Aquatex Defenses. 1 in a blue, flash enchant creature you control. This aura enters. Enchanted creature gains hexproof until end of turn. And then enchanted creature gets +1/+2. This is definitely more of a defensive spell. Obviously, because you're going to negate whatever spell it is that is targeting the creature that you control. And getting a little bit of a buff too, giving it +1/+2 is really nice. Blossom Bind, 1 in a blue enchanted creature. When this aura enters, you tap target creature. Enchanted creature can't become untapped and can't have counters put onto it. So your opponent's not going to be able to put -1/-1 counters from, you know, blighting their spells onto this thing, while also making it unable to untap them, getting around the fact that you know, with these kind of effects, you can still untap the creature, and then, you know, if you tap to attack or whatever, then it doesn't untap. You know, so this is just like a card that has, like, found ways to get around the ways that players would get around this kind of effect. So, just, I think really, this might actually be a pretty decent, like a pretty decent quote-unquote removal spell in the set. I really wouldn't be surprised if it, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being, like, really, really good and limited. Champions of the Shoal, 3 in a blue, 4/6. Another one of the champion cards, so you have to behold a merfolk and exile it. Whenever this creature enters or becomes tapped, you tapped up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it, and when it leaves, you return the exile card to its owner's hand. So, Again, we've seen different ways to just tap creatures. So the fact that this will enter and immediately stun something, if you're able to play it, stun something, and then tap it, and then also stun another thing, then this is going to, then when it goes to attack, you have the potential to stun up to 3 creatures, one of them not untapping on your opponent's next turn, 2 of them still being tapped by the time you get to your next turn, and opens them up for an absolutely huge attack. Disruptor of the Currents, a 3 blue flash convoke creature. It's a 3/3. When this creature enters, you return up to 1 other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So this is like a fine card. Again, there's a lot of things in Merfolk currently that we've seen so far that care about being tapped, so you're going to be able to get some value from those things on top of returning another target permanent, non-land permanent to its owner's hand, more than likely bouncing an opponent's thing, or being able to bounce any one of your other Merfolk and end up getting another ETB trigger or any of your other relevant permanents. Flutterwing Nuisance, a 1-mana 2/2 flying creature that this creature gains, enters with a -1/-1 counter on it. 2 and a blue, you remove a counter from this creature. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw a card. This is one of those effects where this is really nice, but I also feel like if you activate this multiple times, you're going to win, obviously. But I also feel like just being able to activate this once is more than fine with just getting some additional value out of it and of getting some cards back. So for me, this doesn't feel like one of those modes or ways to remove counters from a creature that I'm not really a fan of. I believe you can remove a counter from this, activating it, and then put another counter on it, and then remove that counter again. You're going to be able to draw multiple cards then comes to each one, but that ends up being a lot of mana. And again, really at that point, you're probably winning the game. So I think this is one where if you're able to activate it one time, totally fine, and it just being a 1-mana 2/2 flyer is something that's going to be enough of a nuisance, really, where your opponent is going to have to answer it. And if they don't, if they do, then it feels kind of bad because you ended up drawing a few cards off of it and getting in for damage, and essentially gotten all your value out of it. Glamour Gifter, 1 and a blue, flash flying 1/2. When this creature enters, you choose up to 1 other target creature. Till end turn, that creature has base power and toughness 4/4 and gains all creature types. So this is a way that you can buff up one of your nerds. I think that's pretty neat. So you choose up to 1 other target creature, so you can't flash this in as a 2-mana 4/4. But it does make combat really tricky for your opponent because when they think they have a relatively safe attack, the fact that you just have a 4/4 and you have potentially 5 power and 6 toughness to kind of get in front of it because of this Glamour Gifter is going to be kind of a big blowout to your opponent. Again, if they just feel like they have a situation where they can actually attack. Glamour Might is a 2 and a blue for a 2/2 flash flying creature. When this creature enters, you choose 1 tap target creature, untap target creature. So this was a card that players obviously had put together with Splinter Twin and constructed. It's a 3-mana flash flying threat. It has more than 1 toughness, so it's a little bit better than Pestermite. And of course, 2 power and flying means that the old ways that you would kind of counter the Splinter Twin decks, being able to gain a life, your opponent's making a 1 power creature and you're gaining a life every time, they're not going to be able to kill you because of that. That said, this is just going to be a fine card that is going to disrupt your opponents. Is going to be kind of a tricky combat trick. Either just untapping one of your own creatures or even tapping a creature, and some benefit of being able to tap some of your own creatures that actually care about being tapped if you don't have any other ways to tap them as well. And then also just being a decent bodied flyer as well is going to be pretty good and has a decent amount going for it. I think this is probably to me is probably a really good common in this set, just from all the different synergies and stuff. And on top of that too, another creature that you're fine with kind of picking up and replaying over and over again if you have some creatures that again care about being tapped, big creatures that you want to untap to be able to play defense, to play defense with, or have really good tapping activated abilities. Glenalendra Guardian, 2 and a blue for a 3/4 flash flying. This creature enters with a -1/-1 counter on it, so it ends up being a 2/3. You can pay 1 and a blue and remove a counter from this creature. You counter target non-creature spell. Its controller draws a card. So this is this is one of the, this is a fairy that you're fine with, like putting repeated counters on your opponent's creatures. In fairies, it feels like you're kind of like this, like go wide sort of strategy. Glenalendra is like fine to play at the end of your opponent's turn for the fact that it has flash, and then you're able to ideally untap, and then you have mana available for its ability. You could also just hold up 5 mana to where you could flash this into play and then also counter something that's already on the stack. Or if you just feel like that you need to have the protection right away for Glenalendra to kind of help push through the end of some of the matches. So while giving your its controller a card is not ideal, you can also like technically do this on your own thing and end up drawing cards. Like if your opponent has like a counter spell that could potentially, like mill you or something like that, you just counter your own spell with a -1, if you have a -1/-1 counter on this, and then you get to draw a card from your spell and fizzle your opponent's like counter spell. So there's just there's some situations like that. I don't know how much is going to come up actually in limited, but this overall isn't like necessarily the worst ability to kind of like give its controller a card, because you can also benefit from it in some ways. Glenalendra's answer, 2 and 2 blue. This spell can't be countered. Counter all spells your opponents control and all abilities your opponent controls. You make a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying for each spell or ability countered this way. I'm sure in limited you're going to be able to find plenty of applications where if your opponent can make like a few triggers happen in the same turn, then you're going to be able to counter all of those and make a few 1/1 blue-black fairies. In like the floor of this card is obviously like 4 mana, like uncounterable, like stifle or counter spell that is then going to make a 1/1 flyer, which, obviously isn't the greatest in the world given the potential of this card. Like the floor and the ceiling are so wide on this. I think this is going to be a card that probably sees more play or would be considered for more play in some of the not limited, in the like older formats of Magic. Not something that's necessarily going to show up a lot in standard unless you're able to like counter multiple triggers from your opponent again and just make a bunch of flyers and ideally end the game from there. Gravelgill Scoundrel, 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Vigilance Merfolk Rogue. When this creature attacks, you may tap another untapped creature you control. If you do, this creature can't be blocked. So unblockable 1/3, at the cost of like tapping another creature, not very good. Again, this is a creature that you're going to probably want to put some kind of counters on to make it a decent sized creature. It does have a lot of toughness, so I guess in the worst case you could just like put blight counters on this to do things and just kind of be whatever about the unblockable. But being able to give this unblockable, putting, again, +1/+1 counters on this, or getting to put some kind of auras or whatever, or just being able to potentially draw cards if you hate your opponent with it. If you're able to do those things, then it's a fine card, but that sounds like a lot of work to make this thing good, so I don't think it's really all that great, aside from having the Merfolk and Rogue creature type. Harmonized Crescendo, 4 and double blue for a Convoke spell. Instant, you choose a creature type, you draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. Pretty straightforward. It being instant speed 2 is really nice because with at least the ways that you can make tokens, you're able to... the fact that this has Convoke is probably the biggest thing, and an instant is insane. Obviously, the thing that cares about each permanent you control of like a type, and it being a creature type, of course, is from the Kindred spells that we have seen. So even if you just play some of these random like Kindred permanents that kind of do a thing and they just sit there, Harmonized Crescendo does get some use out of them by turning those into cards later. And there's like 1,000,001 different arts for this. Holy crap. Well, if there's 2 of this one, but like, holy crap. Illusion Spinners, a 4 and a blue for a 4/3 fairy wizard. You may cast this spell as though it had flash if you control a fairy. Flying, this creature has hexproof as long as it's untapped. So, there's a very good chance that you're going to be able to have a fairy just lying around. Again, it just seems like a lot of them are just probably good enough that you're just going to play them in your deck anyway. I wouldn't necessarily play a 5 mana 4/3 flyer with like hexproof when it's untapped. But like definitely giving this flash, I think definitely puts it in the realm of playable. And you know what? Probably like 5 mana 4/3 flyer that, has hexproof is probably fine enough as like a topper in limited, but being able to give this flash is also pretty big, because then you're going to be able to block with it and potentially trade with something even bigger and just kind of swing some momentum in your way. Coolrith Mystic, 2 and a blue for a 2/4. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, this creature gets +2/+0 and gains vigilance until end of turn. We do know that there's some of the elementals, that have evoke, the mythic ones, so you're very unlikely to get them. But there are cards that end up making themselves cheaper. We do have convoke spells and things like that are expensive. So this is a way that you could just have like a 4/4, vigilance creature attacking, and having a 2/4 back is a decent body as well. So not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Not super exciting, but there's definitely a lot of potential here with the help of like the convoke spells, and of course, if you're lucky enough to pull any of the mythic elementals that have evoke, then you're going to be able to get even more value from this mystic. Lockmare is a 1 and a blue for a 4/5 that enters with 3 -1/-1 counters on it, so it ends up being a 1/2. 1 and a blue, you remove a counter from this creature, draw a card, already in. 2 and a blue, you remove 2 counters from this creature, you tap a creature and put a stun counter on it. Limited feels like this is going to be a very hard creature to deal with. Again, worst case, you end up just paying 1 and a blue and you draw a card, and you do that for however many extra turns, and then you slowly end up unlocking this 4/5. But then also just being able to like put 2 counters on something and tap a creature and stun it, essentially getting a 5 mana 3/4 that's going to tap and stun a creature is, to me still feels pretty good. Or, even 4 mana for like a 2/3 that ends up drawing a card that if you get to untap with it, you end up getting to potentially draw even more cards. And again, have a very attractive creature that you can attack and then post-combat do blight stuff to make your creatures better. And then to continue to activate these abilities as well. I'm in for it. I think Lockmare is going to be absolutely awesome. Again, as a limited card, just the fact that it does care about having the -1/-1 counters, it's not going to be a great constructed card, but limited, it's going to be great. Lofty Dreams, 3 and 2 blue for a convoke spell. You enchant the creature. When this aura enters, you draw a card, and the enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has flying. Just I think a solid enchantment. Unfortunately, doesn't have any of the creature types. It's not kindred, so kind of unfortunate there, but. Just being able to, again, convoke this out, get it down pretty early. You end up getting a card for your troubles as long as the creature you don't target ends up dying. And then +2/+2 and flying, a decent amount of stats added and flying, for potentially 0 mana paid. It's kind of hard to have it be bad outside of, obviously, you getting blown out, but you're not spending 5 actual mana. You're potentially spending a few mana and tapping some creatures to get this out. Mirror Form. 4 and double blue. Each non-land permanent you control becomes a copy of target non-aura permanent. Legendary creatures, they're going to make you sad because they don't become non-legendary creatures. But if you just have a board full of, some pretty powerful creatures, like if you can just essentially like find your biggest creature and then all of your non-aura permanents, all your non-land permanents become that thing, is just going to be absolutely insane. Like this is a card that could potentially just end the game on the fact that like you attack with like a bunch of 1/1 flyers, your opponent can't block it, and then it's like, oh, I'm going to turn them all into like 3/4 flyers, and it's like, well, okay, there's like 8 of these on the battlefield, so instead of taking 8, I'm taking 24. So this definitely has some game ending potential, but constructed wise, this is going to be like you get a bunch of permanents and you end up winning the game sort of deal. Noggle the Mind, 1 and a blue, flash, enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and becomes a colorless Noggle with base power toughness 1/1. Probably just, again, another solid, like, essentially removal spell. You remove all the abilities. The creature type is not going to, the creature type's really not gonna matter because as far as I know, like this isn't even like really a thing. So I mean, just in general, and like neutralizes your opponent's biggest creature, and it has flash as well. So it's kind of hard for, I think, a card like this to end up being bad. Oko Lorwyn Liege, 2 and a blue for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. It's another one of these transform cards, so at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay green, in this case, to transform Oko. +2, up to 1 target creature gains all creature types, and this effect doesn't end, so it permanently has, essentially a changeling. And then +1 target creature gets -2, -0 until your next turn. So like one ability that can protect it, another one that can like transform, can make your creature all creature types and care about, again, special creature type buffs and things like that. You pay green to transform it. You get Oko Shadowmoor Scion, which you can pay a blue, flip it to its front side, and then it has all minus abilities on the back side. You -1, mill 3 cards. You may put a permanent card from among them into your hand, so you get some kind of card advantage there while also loading up your graveyard a little bit. -3, you create 2 3/3 green elk creature tokens, which, I mean, putting 6 power into play, off of like 1 mana, and then also potentially, getting to the point where you can flip this and minus it, isn't too bad. -6, you choose a creature type. You get an emblem with creatures you control the chosen type, get +3/+3, and have vigilance and hexproof, which is where, making them all creature types, one of your creatures, all creature types, can be helpful. Obviously, it's the way that you put the most loyalty on Oko, but you turn a few of your creatures into all creature types, and then you minus it, you're going to be able to, get essentially +6/+6, and then vigilance and hexproof. Your opponent's not going to be able to mess with it, and more than likely, you're also going to be able to give a lot of your other creatures, you're going to be able to give a lot of your other creatures those buffs, plus the keywords as well. So, fine Planeswalker, depending on, as long as your opponent's not, like, going super wide, like you're going to be able to neutralize some of the other creatures with like the +1, and then get to a point where maybe you can like +2 and do the thing. This is going to be definitely a empty board. Like you're going to put pressure on your opponent to answer it. Outside of that, if you're already getting pressured, the +1 really isn't going to do much, and this might just gain you some life by your opponent attacking it. Omni Changeling, 3 and 2 blue for a Changeling with Convoke. It's a 0/0 whenever this creature enters as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except it has Changeling. So here's another one of those creatures that we talked about where you could get this back, from your graveyard, or even, some of the other effects that care about power and toughness as 0 power and toughness. And it could just become a copy of like your best thing on the battlefield, getting to double up on that ETB trigger, or being able to double up on the attack or anything else that creature can possibly do in this set. Is pretty nice. And again, being able to have Convoke on something like this is like A+. I think this is going to be a pretty good creature, if not possibly even a great creature in like the limited format. Pestered Wellguard, 3 and a blue for a 3/2. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, you create a 1/1 blue-black fairy creature token with flying. I really like, just being able to make a 1/1. Obviously, this is definitely going to be a creature that you are going to want to find fancy ways of tapping this, and potentially even untapping it and retapping it to make multiple 1/1s in a turn. But this is like, if you can just make a 1/1 off of this every single turn, again, just like either tapping your opponent's creatures or whatever the case may be, you're going to be in a pretty good spot, because 1/1 flyers, turns out, are pretty good in the limited formats. Rime Chill, 6 in a blue. It costs 1 less to cast for each color among permanents you control. Tap up to 2 target creatures. You put a stun counter on each of them, draw a card. So you can potentially get this down all the way to 2 mana. Tap 2 creatures, put stun counters on them, draw a card. Even at like 3 mana, I think probably the cutoff at this being, at like 3 mana. So you end up having like 4 colors. Again, sort of easy to do with a lot of the hybrid cost cards in the set. So like you could easily get this down to like 3, even 4 mana, like tapping 2 creatures, putting stun counters on them, and drawing a card. I think is probably good enough for like me to want to play it. I think you can easily get to 2 colors. 3 and 4, maybe you're like reaching a little hard for some of these vivid cards, but not completely when, again, hybrid mana exists. Rimforge Torque, as I shake my entire computer. 1 in a blue artifact. This enters, choose a creature type. Whenever a permanent you control of the chosen type enters, put a charge counter on this artifact. And then you can pay, tap it, and remove 3 charge counters from this artifact. And when the next instant or sorcery spell, this turn you can copy it and choose new targets for the copy. This seems fine. Obviously, you're kind of balancing act of like playing enough creatures where you're going to be able to put a counter or 2 on this every single turn, while also having enough instant sorceries to play to end up like actually copying them. So this is interesting. I can see something like the Convoke draw spells being really good, or, you know, playing like some of the really Convoke spells in general and being able to copy those, working out very well in conjunction with playing like the creatures and everything like that. So you can use your mana to play the creatures, and then, you know, use the creatures to cast Convoke spells and copy with this. So definitely some potential there, but I could definitely see a world where you're just kind of fighting over, you know, have a bunch of creatures, but I don't have any spells like to copy with this, or I drew more of my spells, I don't have enough creatures to trigger this. So Rhymekin Recluse, a 2 and a blue for a 3/2. When this creature enters, return up to one other target creature to its owner's hand. Being able to double, like, return one of your own creatures to get another, like, ETB, or just like use this like bounce one of your opponent's creatures and continue to put pressure on them. Both are equally fine, so I think this is just like a decent creature all around with some relevant creature types. Elemental Wizard, you know, pretty sweet. Runaway Together, we've seen this in the like original Throne of Eldraine set. 1 and a blue, instant, you choose up to 2 target creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to your owner's hands. Obviously, you can just choose a cheap creature you control and an expensive creature they control, and like you kind of get some value there, on top of getting to do some fancy things in combat by like bouncing your creature and then like returning one of theirs, potentially allowing one of your creatures to survive combat while also getting another one out of combat and getting another good, you know, getting like another ETB trigger out of it. Shine Striker, 4 and 2 blue, flying 3/3 with Vivid. When this creature enters, you draw cards equal to the number of colors permanents you control. 6/6 for a, 6 mana for a 3/3 flyer. Itself, then maybe draws like 1 or 2 cards, isn't very exciting. I think even if you got to like draw 5 cards with this, you know, obviously you would absolutely blow past your opponent, especially if this is like kind of your top deck. You had enough like random permanents kind of sticking around. And even in like board stalls and stuff too. But if you're only drawing like 1 or 2 cards with this, maybe that's like fine enough. Maybe I'm just spoiled, but that just doesn't feel very like as powerful as like some of the other things that are going on in the set, at least from like a limited perspective. Silvergill Mentor, 1 in a blue, you can either pay 2 or behold a merfolk, and you get a 2/1. Then when it enters, you also make a 1/1 white and blue merfolk creature token. 2 mana, getting 3 power across 2 bodies is going to be pretty nice in a creature type that does want to go wide and does have plenty of Anthem effects. Honestly, Silvergill Mentor is pretty good. I don't know if the 1/1 is necessarily worth an additional card a lot of the time, but definitely getting to make multiple bodies, again, in an archetype that wants to kind of go wide, I'm kind of okay with this. Silvergill Peddler, 2 and a blue. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. So, worst case, it ends up being like a merfolk looter of sorts, obviously less evasive. On the other side of it, you know, if you're able to just tap this and get some value from like your other creatures, then you're also able to like draw a discard and potentially find more ways of doing so, you know, like casting other Convoke spells. Spell Snare, counter target spell, mana value 2. Limited, I have a very hard time imagining this sees any amount of play in Limited at all. For Constructed, I think this is going to be great. We see a lot of good 2 mana spells in Constructed. The Spell Snare is just going to automatically slot into, you know, Standard, and even being in Pioneer as well is going to be a pretty big boost for Spell Snare. Stratosaur, 4 and a blue, flying. When this creature enters, target creature gains flying until end of turn, and it has 1 and a blue for basic land cycling. So you can search the library for a basic land, put it in your hand, and shuffle. So basic land cycling is nice because this isn't just getting like a basic island. This can go get like your second color or even your third color that you're kind of splashing for. And, you know, 5 mana, 3/5 flyer isn't really that exciting. I think really what kind of saves this card and makes it relatively attractive is kind of the basic land cycling in it, because, you know, just a 5 mana 3/5 isn't too exciting, and giving a creature flying until end of turn also doesn't really excite me much of at all. Next, Summit Sentinel, 1 in a blue, 1/3. When this creature dies, draw a card. You know, you're throwing this thing under the bus pretty quickly and you're drawing cards. Kind of reminds me of like the I'm gonna say the Ice King, but from like Game of Thrones. Of course, I'm drawing a blank. I'm doing this like 2 a.m, guys. Like, chill out. Sunderflock, 7 and 2 blue. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest mana value among elementals you control. Flying, and when this creature enters, if you cast it, return all non-elemental creature tokens to their owner's hand. This is kind of like the like Scourge of the Fleet, like these style effects where you get to bounce like a bunch of things, and the fact that this is going to cost X less to play, where X is the mana value among elementals you control, means that you can play some of these other elementals that kind of give you some value, but then you're also going to be able to potentially just one-sided, bounce your opponent's entire board and then kill them like on a swing. And if not, then having a 5/5 flyer, is still really nice. Even being able to bounce some of like your own things, but then like maybe some of your creatures end up sticking around. Like you have one elemental in play, and it ends up reducing this down to 4 mana, like a 4 mana for a 5/5 flyer, and you get to replay all of your things. It can be pretty good in my opinion. Swat away 2 and 2 blue. This costs 2 less to cast. If a creature is attacking you, return target spell or creature to the top. Return the owner of target spell or creature puts it on their choice at the top or bottom of their library. So this is potentially for 2 blue. You can put the attacking creature, or if your opponent casts a spell, they can put it on top or bottom of their library. Fine effect, even at 4 mana, I think this is like okay as like a way of like countering a spell without actually countering a spell. You'll be able to get around uncounterable with Swat Away. Sig, Wonderwine Wisdom, 1 and a blue for a 2/2, can't be blocked. When this creature enters or transforms into Sig Wonderwine Wisdom, target creature gains. When this creature deals combat damage to a player, player or planeswalker, draw a card until end of turn. You can pay a white, transform it, and it's a 2/2 that can be blocked, and when it transforms into Wonderbrine Shield, target creature you control gains protection from each color until your next turn. I think definitely more like the front side I'm in for, just allowing a creature to having a creature gain when this creature does combat damage to a player, a planeswalker, draw a card. You can give it to Sig itself, so then Sig is going to be able to potentially get in and draw you a card, while also on the other side, target creature you control is going to gain protection from each color until your next turn. And again, you can just give it to the Sig, and then it's going to be able to protect itself, or potentially protect your best creature, while again also being able to just flip back and forth. This is definitely a creature that feels like you want to be flipping it back and forth, which, we'll find out is like necessarily a good or a bad thing. But, being able to pay like 1 or 2 mana to kind of protect this thing, but then also potentially draw cards off of it, probably fine. This is definitely a card that would probably, I would think, would want to be more suited for constructed play, but, in limited, I think you're going to be pretty happy with this card, because then you also just give, like, your things that care about being tapped, like protection from all colors, and you're able to attack with those things, get their triggers if you don't have any other ways of, like, tapping your own creatures, and then this also becomes, like, a lightning rod for your opponent's, like, removal spells. Tineful Rhyme Speaker, 3 and a blue for a 2/4. When you cast a spell, mana value 4 or greater, draw a card. Players were fine with doing it for 5 or greater and drawing a card. Obviously, this doesn't draw a card when it enters, but you have plenty of Convoke things that you can end up drawing additional cards from. Depending on how many of those things you get, are going to then determine how good this Tineful Rhyme Speaker is. But I have a hard time imagining that this card could be anything worse than, decent, I would say. At least in a limited perspective. Temporal Cleansing, 3 and a blue, Convoke. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library second from the top or on the bottom. So, sorcery speed, again, you could potentially pay 0 mana for something like this. Get some of your creatures that care about being tapped to give you some value, and you end up getting rid of a very annoying non-land permanent on your opponent's side, whether they just put it on the bottom or you end up having to deal with it later. Either way, you're going to end up having time to potentially draw like a counter spell or maybe another removal spell and get rid of the thing that they want to play. Thirst for Identity, 2 and a blue, draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card. I think it's been a while since we've seen like a Thirst for X style of spell. I mean, we've seen it for artifacts, we got it for creatures now, we have it for enchantments. Players have been playing like Into the Wild or whatever the blue one was from the Tarkir Dragonstorm set, which for me at least seems like it would be the better card to play over something like Thirst for Identity. But I mean, again, like in a limited environment, this card's like totally fine. And I think even like Thirst for whatever from the like Theros Beyond Death set ended up being like a really good limited card. So I'm gonna have a hard time believing that 3 mana at instant speed to draw 3 cards and then like discarding like a creature card is gonna be bad. Unexpected Assistance, 3 in double blue, Convoke. You draw 3 cards, then discard a card. Again, totally good. Hard for draw 3 cards and then discard a card to be bad. Unwelcome Sprite, 1 in a blue for a 2/1. Whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, you surveil 2. So obviously, additional value from like your counter spells, plus just again further being rewarded by interacting with your opponent on your opponent's turn and forcing them to use mana on their turn, while also kind of setting up your draws on future turns to continue to interact with them on their turn. Wonderwine Distractor, 3 in a blue, 4/3. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, target creature an opponent controls gets +3/+0 until end of turn. Here's a creature that you definitely, I guess in either case, like you attack with a bunch of creatures, you just give your opponent's biggest thing -3/-0. You're going to feel like you're in pretty good shape. Being able to do this as like a combat trick as well, just to give something like a surprise -3/-0, ends up making some attacks like pretty bad on your opponent, even if the effect is face up on the table. Wonderwine Farewell, 5 and double blue for a Kindred Sorcery Merfolk. Has Convoke, return 1 or 2 target non-land permanents to your hand. Then if you control a Merfolk, you create a 1/1 Merfolk for each permanent return this way. So obviously, you want to control a Merfolk, so then you can end up making 2 1/1s. So essentially for 7 mana, bouncing 2 of your opponent's best permanents, make 2 1/1 Merfolks, again, that are going to care about the other Merfolk things going on. Sign me up. I think that they have like a hard time thinking that this card would be pretty bad, especially if you return 2 things and your opponent only has the capability of playing one of those things. Like, what their next few turns are going to be. They're probably going to play their best one. You have the ability to then probably counter the second one. So you essentially removed one of their worst of the 2 permanents, got 2 1/1s out of it. Again, is something that I have a hard time finding like bad, I guess. Wild Unraveling as additional cost to cast a spell, Blight 2 or pay 1, so you can either pay 3 mana and it effectively a cancel, but for the counter spell you're going to have to Blight 2 onto something. Again, there seems to be a decent amount of creatures that you want to put -1/-1 counters on it that have good effects that remove those counters, so it wouldn't be surprising to me if like Wild Unraveling ended up being like a pretty decent blue card in the limited format. On to black. Auntie's Sentence, 1 in a black. Choose 1. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land permanent card from it. That player discards that card. Target creature gets a -2/-2 until end of turn. So this is a card that early on ends up being a disruption, like a hand disruption spell, and then later in the game ends up being a potential removal spell, or kind of like opens up the avenue for you to attack with a creature that maybe has like a good tap ability or whatever. So like, and again also is like a fine early removal spell. So just having the flexibility, I think, is good enough on my end. Barbed Bloodletter, 1 in a black, flash. When this equipment enters attached to a creature you control, that creature gains a Wither until end of turn. So when it deals damage to creatures, it deals in the form of -1/-1 counters, and the equipped creature gets +1/+2 until end of turn. So another like fine combat trick, where if your opponent has like indestructible creatures or just big creatures, honestly getting to deal Wither to them and give them -1/-1 counters could make those creatures potentially useless as well. You just have to make sure that your opponent's not able to remove those counters fairly easily or get any value from those counters, that they end up just and either the creature ends up dying or severely neutered in that case. Vile Bogart, 1 black for a 1/1. When this creature dies, you put a +1 or put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature. So especially in this set with creatures caring about removing counters from themselves, this could be something that you could add a -1/-1 counter onto your creature. Ideally, you add it onto like your opponent's creature, and this could potentially take out some 2 toughness creatures, on top of some potential sacrifice synergies as well. Or just, again, blighting onto this to then like put a -1/-1 counter on your creature or on another creature, and then getting additional value from like the blight spell or whatever. Like, this is just a very solid like 1 mana creature in this limited format with a lot of potential and a lot of things going for it. Bitter Bloom Bearer, double black for a 1/1 flash flying creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life and make a 1/1 blue-black fairy creature token with flying. I have a hard time believing this card's bad in limited. This obviously is a card that has some potential constructed playability. Again, if you're able to do like the curiosity things, where you're able to, you know, draw a bunch of cards and then kill your opponent before the Bitter Bloom Bearer can get rid of you. Plus, this being a non-legendary creature means that you can just, you know, play multiples of these. And again, like, not necessarily a threat that your opponent has to answer right away. Being 1 toughness is kind of a liability nowadays in Magic, but again, I have a hard time believing that Bitter Blossom, like stabled onto a creature that might be a little bit harder to cast, is going to be bad. Like, I just have a hard time, you know, seeing that this card would end up actually being not good. Blighted Blackthorn, 4 and a black for a 3/7 Treefolk Warlock. When this creature enters or attacks, you may Blight 2, and if you do, you draw a card and lose a life. So you can immediately Blight 2 onto this creature. It ends up being a 1/5. You get to draw a card, lose a life. And then potentially as you attack over time, you can just wither this thing away and trade it in for cards, or again, get more value off of your -1, your creatures that care about having counters put on them. Blight Rot, 2 and a black, put 4 -1/-1 counters on target creature at instant speed. -4 is more than likely going to kill a creature. Obviously, this becomes kind of a liability if it's a, you know, really big toughness creature that your opponent has like a decent like activated ability while also removing the counters from it. But a lot of the time, this is going to straight up remove creatures, and it has the benefit of getting to remove like indestructible creatures as well. So, you know, not that bad. Or creatures that can like prevent combat damage to them or whatever. Like this is going to be a very solid removal spell. Bloodline Bidding, 6 and double black. It has Convoke, and you choose a creature type, and you return all creature cards from the chosen type from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this ends up being a one-sided living end here, where, you know, Convoke, you know, how much is the Convoke actually going to help you? This is probably going to be a deck where you're going to want to, you know, put your own cards into your graveyard following some kind of creature theme, and then being able to bring them all back and ideally kill your opponent. I believe something like goblins will probably benefit the most from this, just because I think red-black is kind of like the goblin colors. I don't think like fairies, you know, you could probably get a decent amount of value just like tapping down a bunch of things, untapping some other creatures, and then, you know, putting tons of stun counters on them. I just have a hard time imagining that you splash black in a color that's not necessarily favoring of like any of the other creatures kind of in the set, if that makes any sense. But this has like, you know, a really high ceiling to just automatically win you a game on the spot, with some really cool art nonetheless. Bogart Mischief, 2 and a black, Kindred, enchantment Goblin. When this enchantment enters, you may Blight 1. If you do, you create 2 1/1 black and red Goblin creature tokens. And then when a Goblin creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So you can kill some of your low toughness Goblins by blighting with this, draining your opponent, and then you can make 2 1/1s as well. That then will later drain your opponent. This is, again, a fine enchantment that sits on the battlefield that if you end up picking up and replaying it, like, you're going to be fine, because you're going to end up netting creatures overall, and you're going to be draining your opponent as well. Bogart Prankster, 1 and a black for a 1/3. Whenever you attack, target attacking goblin you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So this doesn't even have to attack on its own. It can just sit on the battlefield, eat some of the counters that you can that you'll be putting on some of your other creatures, and your attacking goblins are going to get a little bit stronger as well. So like just a fine creature. Bog Slither's Embrace, 1 and a black. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you Blight 1, or you pay 3 mana and you exile target creature. Blight 1 feels very like such a low cost for something like this. Obviously, you know, paying 5 mana for this to exile a creature, not ideal, especially at sorcery speed, but like you could get me there. But Blight 1 onto something, again, on a creature that, you know, you don't mind losing or putting the counters on, like, I think this is just going to be a great removal spell. Probably even bordering on constructed play. Like, again, depending on how much people care about the -1/-1 counters, they're kind of annoying overall, but, you know, just 2 mana to exile a creature is absolutely huge. Champion of the Weird, 3 and a black, you behold a goblin as you cast a spell and you exile it. You pay 1, blight 2, target opponent ends up, has to blight 2, and you can only activate as a sorcery, and then when this creature leaves, you return the exile card to its owner's hand. You could, in theory, put, play this, pay 3 life, and then kill this creature off, and then, potentially get rid of a decent amount of creatures, or severely neuter, in the worst case, your opponent's board. And obviously, if you have more creatures to put minus counters on, you could potentially just, one-sided wrath your opponent with some big creatures to spare. And again, if you care about your creatures dying, this is totally a fine thing that you can do. So I think Champion of the Weird, without, really thinking and remembering, what the other champions were, I think this might be one of the best ones, just because, this could just potentially be a one-sided wrath on its own at the cost of some life, obviously. But people play Toxic Deluge, and you pay 1 life to give everything minus whatever or however much life. So I think if you can kind of manage your opponent's board, or you can use this to pick off some other creatures while you're going wide, I think you're totally going to be fine. Creekwood Safe Right, 1 and a black for a 5/5. This enters with 3 -1/-1 counters on it, and at the beginning of your end step, if there's an elf in your graveyard, this creature has a -1/-1 counter on it, you remove the counter from this creature. I think it's going to be very hard. I think it's going to be a 2-mana 2/2 a lot of the time, and in Constructed more often than in Limited. You might have an elf in your graveyard just because Llanowar Elf is a kill on sight creature. So maybe you could play this and you end up getting a 3/3, but is playing this and having a 3/3 and then potentially a 4/4 on the next end step going to be worth it? Probably not. But again, if you have ways of wanting to remove -1/-1 counters from other creatures to do things, this is just going to carry them very nicely. But I think just having a 3/3 on the next on your turn 3 and a 4/4 on turn 4, is kind of whatever. Honestly, all things considered, I think it's kind of whatever. Darkness Descends, 2 and double black, put 2 -1/-1 counters on each creature. You can one-sided wrath your opponent by getting rid of all of their small creatures, while your big toughness creatures, again with these counters, sensing a theme here, that have ways of removing these counters, then you're going to be in very good shape. This is a card that is fine if it just ends up wrathing the board, but if you're able to just again squeeze out even more value from this by those activated abilities that care about removing counters, then Darkness Descends is going to put in extra work and end up being a more than fine card in your limited formats. Dawnhand Dissident, 1 black for a 1/2. You can tap it to blight 1, you surveil 1, and then you can tap it to blight 2 and exile a target card from a graveyard. And during your turn, you may cast creature spells from among cards you own exiled with this creature by removing 3 counters from among other creatures you control, in addition to paying their cost. So during your turn, you may cast creature spells from among cards you own exiled with this card. So I believe then if you could exile cards from your opponent's graveyard and you have the ability to cast them, is my understanding. I don't think you have to necessarily own the cards, but obviously you're going to want to put you can just self-contained, you can put the counters on the creatures yourself and then remove them by casting those things, and so that you can remove more cards from graveyards or surveil more to potentially put your own creatures in your graveyard, and then you essentially draw cards with this Dawnhand Dissident, while also being some sneaky graveyard hate as well. Even though you have to wait a turn, you could just blight 2 onto this, kill the creature, and then you exile a creature from your opponent's graveyard that they care about. So weird, and obviously not ideal form of graveyard hate, but still graveyard hate, so it might still be fine. But obviously you're going to get a lot of mileage out of this if you're able to, play creatures that are going to want these minus counters that you're then just going to remove later to cast those things, and then are again fine with continuing to throw counters on them as you work through and fill out your board even more. Dawnhand Eulogist, 3 and a black for a 3/3 menace. When this creature enters, you mill 3 cards. There's an elf in your graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Fine creature. 4 mana 3/3 with menace is a pretty good stat line, and then you're able to drain your opponent and gain 2 life. Milling cards as well. We've already seen cards that care about certain creature types being in the graveyard. Even Dawnhand just being able to exile certain things. This does seem like it's going to have a decent amount of synergy with some of the other stuff going on in the color black, and a fine card to replay over and over again. Just you're not going to be able to do too much because you're going to end up milling yourself out. But, you know, draining your opponent, being a relatively aggressive creature, I'm in for it. Dose of Donglo, 4 and a black. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this isn't your main phase, you blight 2. So obviously, you can either have an instant speed, like reanimation spell, at the cost of being able to put 2 -1/-1 counters on creatures you control, or on a creature you control, or you do it during your main phase as like a sorcery speed reanimation spell, and it's just a regular reanimation spell. Obviously, all going to hinge on the creature that you end up getting back, but this has the potential to be absolutely insane, even if the only creature you get back is a creature that you have to then blight the counters on. Dream Caesar, 3 and a black for a 3/2. When this creature enters, you may blight 1. If you do, each opponent discards a card. So you can either have like a 4-mana 2/1 flyer that ends up making your opponent discard a card, or again, if you can put the -1/-1 counter anywhere else, then you end up having a 3/2 flyer. Totally fine, and probably a reason why that this card doesn't also, like, when it attacks, you blight 1, you get to do it, because that would be super annoying to deal with. Gloom Ripper, 3 and black for a 4/4 Elf Assassin. When this creature enters, target creature you control gets +X/+0 until end of turn, and up to 1 target creature an opponent controls gets -0/-X until end of turn, or X the number of elves you control plus the number of elf cards in your graveyard. So this is a card that you don't need to have a full board to have it end up being in a way a removal spell. You can give a creature you control a massive buff to its power, while also potentially removing a creature from the battlefield as well. And it being a 4/4 is pretty nice. Again, like, really expensive, not ideal to like bounce this and replay it over and over again. But, you know, I guess if you can get there, you know, in like the later parts of the game and being able to pick off a creature while also, again, making, you know, forcing your opponent to potentially just chump block with another creature to, you know, stop them from dying in one attack. Like Gloom Ripper could be pretty good. I mean, just even in that scenario, I think Gloom Ripper is a totally fine card as like a top end for like these elf decks. Norlback Elm, 2 and a black for a 3/4. This creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters on it. You pay 2 and a black and you remove 2 counters from this creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So you get a 1/2 when you play this, and then you can potentially unlock the 3/4, kill a creature, get in for 3 damage. Like, this is good. Like, this is fine. Obviously, you want to then put multiple counters on this. This is actually one of the ones where it ends up being kind of awkward if you only blight 1 onto it, because you want to remove 2 from the creature. But, you know, there seem to be like a decent amount of like blight 2 things, or like where you can put enough minus counters on this where, you know, you get a few activations out of this. You can actually kill some pretty decent sized creatures. Grave Shifter, 3 and a black for a changeling 2/2. And when this creature enters, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Obviously a kind of nod to Gravedigger, but it ends up having all creature types, and it looks really sad. We'll see a changeling at their funeral. Kithgan saying meaning they won't be forgotten. So that's pretty cool. Like, that's cute. I like the art on that. Like, again, another fine limited card. Pick up your best creature from your graveyard. All the, you know, having every relevant creature type that it would actually care about. So, you know, even having some elf synergies as well. Pretty good. Grub Storied Matriarch, 2 and a black for a 2/1 with Menace. When this creature enters or transforms into Storied Matriarch, return up to 1 target goblin card from your graveyard to your hand. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a red to transform it into Grub Notorious Auntie, where whenever it attacks, you can blight 1, and if you do, you create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of the blighted creature, except at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token. You can pay black and transform it to the front. Now, obviously, you could kill off like one of your 1 toughness goblins. Get to do a thing. There's a lot of decent like eternal like 1 toughness goblins. You end up getting, you know, the ETB again, or when it attacks, whatever. And then on the next turn you flip it and you return it from your graveyard to your hand, potentially replay it, and so on. You just kind of continue to get value out of it. I think Krenko is also legal in standard, so like, you know, if you're able to like live the dream of like you untap with like a Krenko, and then you are able to activate Krenko to make a ton of goblins, and then use Grub to blight onto it, and then it doesn't die and then you're able to make another copy of it, and then it has haste, you're able to tap it and create even more goblins or whatever. That's probably like the big Christmas land that we live in with something like this. But like in the Eternal formats, this ends up being a pretty decent card. Next, we have Gut Splitter Gang, 3 and a black for a 6/6. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may blight 2. If you don't, you lose 3 life. So this is a card that you get a little bit better of a rate on a creature, but you're forced to blight or you end up losing life. So, I mean, if you're able to race your opponent or kind of negate some of the life loss, then blighting 2 is never really going to matter. But the fact that you can do this, and again, you have these creatures that do care about having counters, then you're able to continually to like remove those counters, and like you never have to worry about losing the life. It ends up just being kind of worse when this is your only creature, because it's really hard to, blight onto this, but you probably also don't want to lose the 3 life, so this thing will kind of like slowly kill itself over time. So, you're definitely looking for the -1, like the -1/-1 counter synergies, for like a card like this, or getting to a point where you don't really care, you're fine with losing the life, because like the damage that you're losing from blighting is going to be more significant than the life that you lose from the ability. Next, we have Heirloom Auntie, 2 and a black for a 4/4 that enters with 2 -1/-1 counters. Whenever another creature you control dies, you surveil 1, then remove a -1/-1 counter from this. Another easy card that you could remove multiple -1/-1 counters from, and even get to surveil 1 as a result like of those creatures dying. I give you some extra value from some of those other creatures that end up dying, or at least kind of makes things interesting in a way, because then you have some of these like aristocrat like type things that you can do with this kind of ability. Iron Shield Elf, 1 and a black for a 3/1. You discard a card. This creature gains indestructible until end of turn, and you tap it. We've seen this effect multiple times across multiple creatures. This is fine. A lot of the time, this effect ends up getting used for like reanimation purposes, I think, rather than just being able to have an aggressive creature that could potentially just cause you to discard a card to like kill like one of your opponent's creatures, or trades off whenever it ends up being convenient for you. Moonglove Extractor, 2 and a black, 2/1. Whenever this creature attacks, you draw a card and lose 1 life. Here's a creature that you are kind of fine with sticking around quite a bit, actually, just by getting to attack, draw a card, lose a life. Obviously, with 1 toughness, it's very easy for this creature to just die, but if you're able to clear the way for it and end up drawing multiple cards with it, you end up getting more than your money's worth, and then yeah, I mean, this is a card that's going to be great if you attack with it multiple times, bad if you never get to attack with it, and then just like okay if you get 1 attack in. Next, we have Moon Shadow. Absolutely beautiful. If I ever open up one of these, like I am never selling it, and it's staying in my, like I'm gonna have to put it in like my shadow box. That'd be pretty sweet. But it is a 1 mana 7/7 with Menace. This creature enters with 6 -1/-1 counters on it. Whenever one or more permanent cards are put in your graveyard from anywhere while this creature has a -1/-1 counter on it, you remove a -1/-1 counter from it. Eternal formats are going to absolutely love this card, because they're the ones that are going to be able to abuse it the best. Since the permanent cards can go anywhere, obviously if you have like fetch lands on the battlefield, you're going to be able to remove those counters. If you have things that you sacrifice to get some sort of value out of it, you're going to be able to remove the counters from it. Like standard, maybe if there's like there is an aristocrat strategy, but like if you're in for just having a really big creature that is going to get in an attack, and you have some of these free sack outlets, I mean, the more power to you. You're going to be able to get this up to a 7/7 as soon as possible, and just being able to block this is going to be incredibly tough. And again, having all these counters on it, having those synergies of removing counters, but like this art is absolutely sick as well. I love that art. Mornsong Aria, 1 and double black for a legendary enchantment. Players can't draw cards or gain life. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player loses 3 life, searches the library for a card, and puts that card into their hand. This, like, there's like combos like in Commander and stuff like that, where you basically make it so you either control your opponent's draws, or like they can't actually search, so they end up just losing life anyway. I don't know how much of the stuff is in their standard, and if you made it this far, let me know if there's anything that actually stops searches in standard. This is going to be a little bit worse. In standard, insofar as your opponent's going to get the first crack at searching for a card. And obviously, if it's like just a card to remove this, then you made your opponent lose 3 life, which still isn't very exciting, all things considered. But if you can kind of leverage this in your favor, like in the extreme case of like taking an extra turn after you play this, so that you're the first person to search off of this, can probably work out. But, you know, in general, like you want to have ways like stopping your opponent from searching so that you're the only one that searches, or they end up still losing life and they don't get any cards out of it, and they're locked out of adding new cards to their deck to where you can then easily win the game when your opponent can't play the game. Mud Button Curse Tosser, 1 black for a 2/1. It feels like a that honestly, like you know, ADHD brain, like that kind of just reminds me of like, you know, I'm gonna start using that as like an insult for people, like a Mud Button Curse Tosser. 1 black for a 2/1. As an additional cost, you behold a goblin or pay 2 mana. This creature can't block, and when this creature dies, you destroy target creature and opponent controls with power 2 or less. So this is actually interesting. Like, you either want to sacrifice this thing or obviously attack and force your opponent to block with it. Because the fact that it can't block means that you can't just, you know, trade it off with like one big creature, or, you know, with like one creature and then kill off another one. So really interesting kind of design there. I do kind of like this because you have to find creative ways of killing it, whether it's blighting, putting blight counters onto it, sacrificing it, or just running it into like a big thing if your opponent can't necessarily take the damage. So pretty interesting. Nameless Inversion is a reprint. 1 and a black, Kindred Instance Shapeshifter. It's all creature types, and a target creature gets +3, -3, and loses all creature types until end of turn. So you can take away all those creature type buffs or anything from that creature by having it lose all the creature types, but also giving it something like +3, -3. This is the flexibility of being a pump spell on like one of your bigger creatures and then killing any of the 3 toughness creatures that your opponent has. This has also been like a thing where I think it's like with Dakin, like Freeblade or whatever, where you cast this over and over again. Hasn't really been something that I think players really played in like 60 card constructed really like ever for a long time. But, you know, again, when you get a lot of these like creature type buffs and things like that, you know, there is a lot of value to be had there. Nightmare Sower, 3 and a black for a Fairy Assassin. It's a 2/3 with flying and lifelink. Whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, you put a -1/- counter on up to 1 target creature. The flexibility of this to not only put it on your opponent's creature, but on your creature, so you can like kind of finish off creatures on your opponent's turn. By, you know, obviously by casting spells on their turn. But you can also just put -1/- counters on your creatures to, again, get value off that activation. So, really neat. And like a 2/3 flying lifelink creature, this is going to swing a lot of races in your favor just by getting you a chip over and hit your opponent for 2, gain 2 life, that sort of thing. Perfect Intimidation, 3 and a black. Choose one or both. Target opponent exiles 2 cards from their hand or remove all counters from target creature. Like Moonshadow, like if you can remove a lot of counters from like a creature and then also like knock 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, like getting, like unlocking like a big creature that's been blighted a bunch and then also getting 2 cards out of their hand, or even removing all the counters from like a creature that maybe they're looking to draw some extra cards or whatever. They're like willing to kind of set themselves back, you know, to potentially get ahead on cards in some way, whether it's by, you know, by the effects or anything. You just remove all the counters off them. Less good, I think, than removing all the counters off of like your creature, like a big creature that you can't necessarily remove the counters off of naturally, like by its own abilities or anything. But, you know, that's where this card, Perfect Intimidation, is going to see it kind of its play. 4 mana to get 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, especially the exile them. Not great. Getting to remove all the counters off your creature while also putting pressure on your opponent's hand, I'd say pretty good. Requiting Hex, a 1 black for an additional 1 black instant, and as an additional cost, you may blight 1. You destroy target creature with mana value 2 or less. If the spell's additional cost was paid, you gain 2 life. So, you know, like this in conjunction with like the Goblin, you can end up like getting rid of like a ton of stuff and being able to gain 2 life as well. Is you know, is totally fine. I think that this is a pretty efficient removal spell for especially like the older formats, because it does care about mana value and not power and toughness. So I mean, Fatal Push is a card that saw plenty of play in standard, you know, and no, like not a lot of reliable ways to trigger Revolt, and it saw play. And I can only imagine Requiting Hex is also going to be one of those cards that, you know, if you don't pay the blight, fine, whatever, and if you can, like the life's going to be nice when you want it. Wretched Wretch is a 2 and a black for a 4/2. When this creature dies, if it had -1/-1 counters on it, returns to the battlefield under its owner's control, and it loses all abilities. So you can blight onto this creature, do your thing, and then it comes back and ends up being a 4/2. Not very exciting, because obviously if it just kept all of its abilities, you'd be able to do this over and over and over again. Obviously that's there to kind of stop it, and it's probably going to be a little bit harder to track in paper, and it's something that you're probably going to have to watch out for. But nonetheless, like, this is a card with a relevant creature type. Obviously not like a crazy stat line or anything, but you know, a creature that you're fine with like blighting onto. Like, even if you put a -1/-1 counter on to do something, block and trade with like a 3 toughness creature, and then it returns back to the battlefield, it's gonna be pretty good. I don't think this card's like absolutely terrible. It might actually be pretty good in limited. There's a lot of potential for this card. Scarblade Scout, 1 and a black for a 2/2 lifelink elf scout. When this creature enters, you mill 2 cards. This is kind of like an effect we've seen in multiple limited formats. You know, still probably pretty good, especially with, you know, some of the graveyard things that the elf archetype wants to do. Scarblade's Malice, 1 black, target creature you control gains death touch and lifelink until end of turn. When that creature dies this turn, you create a 2/2 black and green elf creature token. So getting to put this on like an elf creature, also like technically being like a quote unquote protection spell, because you're going to be able to at least get a 2/2 out of the deal. But you know, putting this on like a small creature is going to then upgrade that creature, and then putting this onto, well, and then also potentially trade with it, which a lot of elves are small, as it turns out. So like this is like a decent-ish combat trick. Nothing insane, nothing that's going to get you out of bed, but can technically upgrade some of your creatures as well. Shimmer Creep, 4 and a black, menace for a 3/5. Vivid, when this creature enters, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is among the color permanents you control. This effect I can get behind. Like a 5-mana 3/5, like the stats and stuff aren't impressive. The keyword's really good. But getting to drain your opponent for like 3 or 4 life is going to be pretty good, and I think that's where a lot of these Vivid creatures are going to get their value. You know, how good they're going to be is how well you can get to that 3rd or 4th color. Taster of Wares, 2 and a black for a 3/2. When this creature enters, target opponent reveals X cards from their hand, where X is the number of goblins you control. You choose one of those cards, and that player exiles it. If this is a sorcery card that is exiled this way, you may cast it for as long as this creature, as long as you control this creature, and the mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. So at the very least, you're going to be able to get, you know, 1 card out of your opponent's hand, and that player is going to exile it as well, so they're not even going to have the potential to get it back from their graveyard as well. And if you never get to cast that card, it's probably fine. Obviously, this is going to be a lot better, where you're able to have your opponent reveal multiple cards, so that the choice, instead of getting like the absolute worst card in their hand, or potentially like a land and not being able to do anything with it, because it says play, right? Yeah, if it's a sorcery, like you end up playing it. So like more goblins is going to increase the chance that you actually get to get additional value from this thing, and not a bad like blink target or something to like sacrifice, or, you know, put counters on if you have ways to get it back, and do this like over and over and over again to put more pressure on your opponent's hand. Twilight Diviner, or Diviner, 2 and a black for a 3/3. When this creature enters, use Referal 2. Whenever one or more creatures you control enter, if they entered or were cast from the graveyard, you create a token that's a copy of one of them. This ability only triggers once each turn. So if you have creatures that you want to cast, or have the ability to cast creature cards from your graveyard, or even like the creature that we talked about here earlier, and Wretched Wretch, like with Twilight Diviner, you can end up getting another copy of like that creature. So definitely, if you're able to cast multiple things from your graveyard, that's going to be great. And it being like a 3-mana 3/3, you know, has a nice stat line on top of just getting into Real 2 as well. Have the potential that even like creatures that you flip over, like Narcomoeba, whatever, you can then get back and then make copies of those. Not very exciting, but definitely a lot of potential of just getting more value out of creatures that are going to enter the battlefield from the graveyard, or creatures that you can cast from the graveyard. Unbury, 1 and a black, you choose one. Return target creature from your graveyard to your hand, or return target creature, or 2 target creatures from that share creature type from your graveyard to your hand. Instant speed as well. You know, so you're either going to be able to get your best creature back, or you could potentially get your best creature back plus another friend. Again, like changelings, and there being like really good changelings to play is going to make it even better, because then you're just going to be able to pick up a changeling for free, and then also the creature you're going to pick up anyway. So I feel like a lot of the time you're going to end up getting 2 creatures with this card, and you know, I think that's playable in limited. I think that actually is something that is that can be pretty powerful. Finally, getting into red, Ashling Rekindled. 1 in a red. Whenever this creature enters or transforms, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. Then, if you pay a blue, you can transform it into Ashling Rhymebound. When this enters, or when this creature transforms into Ashling Rhymebound, and at the beginning of your first main phase, you add 2 mana of any one color. Spend this mana and only cast spells with mana value 4 or greater, and then you can pay a red and transform it to the front side and continue to do that thing over and over again. This one's weird and pretty interesting, just because, I mean, it is a lot of mana. Like, you go to your turn, you can cast like a 4 mana spell, like it's technically going to be ramp because you flip to that side. And then the fact that it's going to re-trigger on the main phase over and over again means that, you know, if you just only get a loot out of Ashling from the front side, and then a few turns later, you potentially have like 6 mana on like turn 4 to cast, you know, some kind of big spell. You know, I think this one's interesting. I think the front side is like fine enough even on its own. Like, I could potentially see this scene play in like some of the looting decks. Just again, being a spell, a little bit more difficult to, you know, justify like the back half of it, because then you're going to essentially take a turn off to flip it to this side. And then, you know, have to, I say take a turn off. You're going to have to spend a mana to like get it to that side, which might be fine. But I think just flipping this back and forth just to get a discard and then draw a card, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the thing where it's like this is a slam dunk play. But the potential's there, where if some of these looting decks want to go even bigger with their spells, so they get the use out of the mana of the turn that they flip, you could probably be in pretty good shape. And Ashling could actually be a card that that sees play in Constructed. Boldwyr Aggressor, 3 and double red for a 2/5 with double strike. Other giants you control have double strike. Giants are absolutely massive. If you're able to get a board full of these, you're going to be in pretty good shape, I would argue. Double strike obviously is an insane keyword, just being able to deal first strike damage and then also being able to deal regular strike damage. So you're able to like kill the small creatures before they have a chance to even deal damage to you, and then these creatures could also potentially trade up as well. And then any pump spells are going to be potentially lethal. So, you know, double strike is just, again, like first strike is an annoying keyword. Double strike is even more annoying because you're essentially going to deal double damage while also having all the original annoyingness from first strike. Bone Club Berserker, 3 mana, 3 in a red for a 2/4. This creature gets +2/+0 for each other goblin you control. Just another red creature that, you're going to want, I mean, obviously you're going to want to build into goblins to make this thing as big as possible, you know, so ideally it ends up being a 4 mana 4/4, or a play like 6/4 or an 8/4, and opens up the door for obviously making it unblockable, finding ways to make it evasive and one-shot your opponent, kind of in a way that Boldwyr Aggressor can kind of do that. Maybe not necessarily for itself, although it certainly can with the help of some pump spells, but potentially make an even bigger giant lethal on its own. Boulder Dash, 1 in a red. Boulder Dash deals 2 damage to any target and 1 damage to any other target. So you can kill like potentially a creature that has minus counters on it, while also getting rid of like another smaller creature that, you know, I guess probably the 2 damage to like, kill a creature that doesn't have counters on it, and then 1 damage to like, kill another one. So you potentially have a 2-for-1 setup here. While this is also like 2 damage to like a creature in standard, and then like 1 damage to your opponent, with like the upside of getting to deal 2 to one and 1 to another. Also, like conveniently enough, like gets rid of a Badger Mole Cub and the land too. I mean, that's pretty neat. Brambleback Brute, 2 in a red for a 4/5. This enters with 2/1/1 counters. 1 in a red, you remove a counter from this creature. Target creature can't block this turn. Totally serviceable. I think this ends up being a fairly good creature, like a 3/4, and then like your opponent can't block and you're still getting in for damage. Also a giant as well, so potentially giving a double strike here. Burning Curiosity, 2 in a red. As an additional cost, you may blight 1. You exile the top 2 cards of the library, and then if the additional cost is played, you exile 3, and then until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. Really good card advantage spell here. Again, there's plenty of -1/-1 counter synergies, so you're going to be able to do plenty fine there. Also, just being able to get 2 cards with this and having them available to you until your next turn. You know, if you end up hitting a land off of it and a spell, then that's kind of like your whole next turn, and you don't spend any more additional cards out of your hand. Champion of the Path, 3 in a red for a 7/3. You behold an elemental and exile it as an additional cost, and whenever another elemental you control enters, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. And then you can exile this card, and when it leaves, then you return the exile card to its owner's hand. 7 power is a lot of power on this creature. 3 toughness is a little concerning there. But if you're able to like play this, and again, like really the evoke elementals in this would be absolutely sick. Just for the fact that you're going to get some value off of it, and then they're also going to deal damage equal to their power to each opponent, so they're not even going to target your opponent, so they can't necessarily like give themselves hexproof to kind of like fizzle it. Champion just being kind of like a supercharged like I guess not even like a supercharged like seismic tremors, because that wouldn't technically be right. I think the dragon that I can't think of that was an outlaws, like it kind of does that, but just for like the elementals and stuff. Cinder Strike, 1 red as an additional cost. You can blight 1. It deals 2 damage to target creature and deals 4 damage to that creature instead if the spell's additional cost was paid. So another card that can get rid of small creatures, and then you can also continue to just extract value by dealing with an even bigger creature and potentially setting yourself up to get another activation from one of your creatures. Collective Inferno, 5 mana enchantment, Convoke. As this enchantment enters, you choose a creature type. You double all damage that sources you control of the chosen type would deal. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of damage. So you double all the damage that sources you control the chosen type would deal. So this is like a way that you can essentially like your Kindred deck can have like a Furnace of Wrath on the battlefield, right? And the fact that that's Convoke means that you can get this out even sooner. You know, again, playing like some of the red-based strategies like Elementals or Goblins more specifically. It seems like the more playable one, in my opinion. You can get this down pretty early and then continue to just like have your creatures like trade up, continue to go wide while also going to deal double damage, and like any other like Anthem effect is just going to amplify the damage. Elder Auntie, 2 in a red. When this creature enters, you make a 1/1 goblin. So like 3 mana for 2/2 that makes a 1/1, 3 mana for 3 power worth of guys across 2 bodies. I mean, it's hard for this to like be bad, in my opinion. I think that this is pretty solid overall, or not really in constructed, but more so in limited, and does synergize well with some of the other creatures that we see that care about goblins in the set. Endblaze Epiphany, X in red. When it deals X damage to target creature, when that creature dies this turn, exile a number of cards on the top of your library equal to its power. Then you choose an exile card this way, and until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So it's a fireball for creatures that ends up potentially being card advantage depending on how big the creature is. Obviously, just being able to do this for like on a 2 or 3 toughness creature, and then getting to look at some cards and potentially have another card that you're going to want to play later is going to be pretty neat. And this card's going to scale up from the early game to the late game. You know, probably like this is probably fine. This is probably a fine card overall. Enraged Flamecaster, 2 in a red, 3/2 reach. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, this creature deals 2 damage to each opponent. Then this can kind of be like a win condition if you're able to set up like one of those loops where you just like recast like a cheap creature like over. I say a cheap creature, but like one of these creatures over and over and over again. Again with like evoke elementals, some of them existing now in standard, but if you have like the ability to do this like in modern, with like the evoke like shenanigans and stuff like that, you can end up just like kind of like one-shotting your opponent through like a specific loop. Explosive Prodigy, 1 in red for a 1/1. When this creature enters, it deals X damage to target creature and opponent controls, where X is the number of the color permanents X is the number of colors among permanents you control. So potentially, you know, dealing 2, 3, 4 damage with a creature ends up being worth obviously a lot more than doing it on a spell. Simply for the fact that the body is obviously going to potentially put pressure on your opponent. And again, with any of the other elemental synergies, you can potentially hit your opponent for like 2 or 3 damage, and then also get rid of like a decent sized creature on their side. Feed the Flames, 3 in a red. Feed the Flames deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature dies this turn, exile it instead. Perfectly fine removal spell. 4 mana, 5 damage, instant speed. You know, you can gain a lot of tempo from your opponent tapping out for like a 5 mana play, and then just being able to kill it, exiling it. They have no way of ever bringing it back, and then you just keep it pushing. Flame Breeder, 1 in a red. You spend 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast elemental spells or activate abilities of elemental sources. So this is a way that you can turbo out even more elementals, playing like a 5 mana elemental on turn 3 if possible. I believe that this is also a reprint as well. Yeah, I'm like 99% sure that this is a reprint. Flame Chain Mauler, 1 in a red, 2/2. This creature gets +1/+0 and gains Menace until end of turn. Creature that's a mana sink, and it gets a relevant keyword ability once you actually activate this. But, you know, just like okay as like a 2 mana 2/2, probably like a filler level, like uncommon in limited. Flamekin Guild Weaver, 3 in a red for a 4/3 trample. When this creature enters, you carry a treasure token. So this can kind of ramp you up to a 6 mana thing on another turn, and also just a decent power thing. Probably not super fantastic of a creature. Like I don't really have any like strong feelings either way for this. Just making your treasure token, you potentially, you know, you get the mana back, so you could like do something with it on that turn, or you can just kind of bank it and end up doing something else later on. Giant Fall, 1 in a red. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent controls, or destroy target artifact. Again, another one of these flexible spells. You know, the other one we saw destroys an enchantment or deals 4 damage to something. I think 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. This just allowing you to not even fight, but have something like a Flamekin Guild Weaver, where you can just like use the 4 power creature to end up killing something. You know, ends up being really nice. Goat Nap, 2 in a red. You gain control of target creature opponent controls, untap that creature, and gains haste. If that creature is a goat, it also gets +3/+0. I also feel like that this is a reprint as well. But like threat and effects usually have a like vary on how good they actually are. They can obviously be great if you end up stealing a great creature. They can be absolutely terrible if your opponent's creatures suck. And then like it being a goat, you know, with like changelings and stuff like that, you could steal like your opponent's changeling, and then you end up having like probably like a 4 or 5 power thing stolen. But, you know, unless you have like ways of like sacrificing it, or you really put them in a tough spot where, you know, it's a creature that they need to block and they're going to end up killing it or whatever, is really where these are kind of judged. And I think at least for limited, like this is just fine. Standard, you know, and constructed, you know, these are a dime a dozen. Goliath Daydreamer, 2 in double red for a 4/4. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you exile that card with a dream counter on it instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. When this creature attacks, you may cast a spell from among the cards you own and exile with a dream counter without paying their mana cost. So ideally, you're casting like a really, you know, a big instant or sorcery. You're finding a way to make it cheap, so then you can kind of double up on it. Aside from that, like, I'm not really mad if you play like some kind of like burn spell or some kind of like value, like maybe like impulse type of effect with this, just to, you know, be able to get that effect again, kind of like when you attack with it. And then the fact that also you may cast spells from your own, exile with dream counters on them. So like even like the first Goliath Daydreamer, if it dies, like you play another one, it's also going to have the dreams from the other Goliath, and then be able to cast those spells. Again, I think like the huge big thing is if you're able to like cast a spell like from your hand without paying its mana cost, and then you're also getting to put a dream counter on it, and then being able to cast it again. You know, there's the potential that you could cast like a really big spell, put a counter on it, and then cast it again with Goliath Daydreamer. So really, you know, the ceiling is there. It just depends on if like a 4 mana for a 4/4 is going to be worth it. And I think a lot of the times it's not going to be in standard, but I think you get incredibly far ahead if you're able to actually pull this off. Gristle Glutton, 1 in a red, 1/3. You can tap it, blight 1, discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So this is a creature that you can put counters on itself, and you can just discard and draw like whatever else, like loot away whatever crap that you have in your hand, or just put -1/-1 counters on like other creatures and continue to gain value that way. This seems like I think relatively deceptively powerful card in my opinion, at least when it comes to limited. What isn't deceptively powerful is Hexing Squelcher. I love this card. 1 in a red, 2/2. This spell can't be countered. Ward, pay 2 life. Spells you control can't be countered. Other creatures you have, ward, pay 2 life. I made a short on this, and I don't think I really got to explain like all the things that I really like from it. This alternate art's also really nice as well. But the fact that this is like a lightning rod for removal means that like you're more than likely going to play your other creatures, and your opponent is not going to really be able to kill the Squelcher and then also counter whatever spell you're playing, or they're going to be forced to kill the other creature spells that you're playing, leaving the Squelcher around, making it even tougher. And if you get multiples of these things, you have multiple instances of ward paying 2 life, meaning that if you just have 2 of these in play, then you're obviously extra insulated from your opponent killing a Squelcher and then countering a spell, because they have to kill 2, and then if they kill 2, they're paying 6 life, spending 2 cards, and potentially spending a 3rd card to counter your spell. Like, I think you get a lot out of that, and if Hexing Squelcher ends up dealing, 2, 4, 6, 8 damage to your opponent before they end up answering it, like all the counter spells that you probably nullified from them, for all the removal spells that you've made even worse, just by playing this card. I mean, and it coming down early. I mean, I know it can't be countered, but just it coming down early is nice, because then you're not like playing this and then playing another effect that you want to have uncounterable, and your opponent using a removal spell on this. Like you're potentially making them use the removal spells on their turn to end up dealing with the Squelcher, which also makes it like better. Like this isn't just I'm gonna hose control decks. It's like I'm gonna hose like interactive decks as well. Impolite Entrance, 1 red, target creature gains trample until on a turn, draw a card. This is fine. This is a card that like had seen play before, especially like some of the other red decks like in Pioneer, where it's just like, all right, here's like my Slick Shot show off. I'm going to play a spell, or I don't have to target it. It's going to end up growing because it is a non-creature spell. This is going to give it trample. I'm going to draw a card, and then like boom, you play like a flurry of like bird spells, and you hit your opponent for like 19 or something crazy like that. So fine card. Like this one could actually see play in some of the other like red strategies that we see that maybe want to play something like Slick Shot Show Off to have that big explosive turn, or like any of these other red creatures where giving them trample is going to be beneficial for them to just, again, kind of further deal like excess damage to them. Kindle the Inner Flame, 3 in a red, Kindred Sorcery Elemental. Create a token that's a copy of target creature control, except it gains haste. And at the beginning of your end step, you sacrifice this token. And then you can pay 1 in a red, or you can flashback it for 1 in a red, and behold 3 elementals to get this effect. So this is a pure copy effect that obviously it cares about being an elemental card. So like any of the cards that produce mana to cast elemental spells, you're able to do that sort of thing. And then beholding elementals, obviously, to behold an elemental, you choose an elemental you control or reveal an elemental card from your hand. So you could have them on the battlefield already, and then copy another thing, get more ETB triggers from that, and then of course any associated things from it entering the battlefield. Like a really neat, like this is cool. For the fact, like 4 mana, like make a token copy of something. Like sure, you could probably copy something that has some other like tangible things that stick around, but being able to do this again later, especially for 2 mana and potentially just having a board full of things that you can already behold, ends up being like not really much of a drawback or a challenge for flashing this back. Cool Wrath Zealot, 5 in a red for a 6/5. When this creature enters, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Basic land cycling. Another like fine basic land cycling card. This one I feel like is a lot better for the fact like a 5 mana 6/5. This is a big body that potentially gets you another card and allows you to see an extra card, in those games where you're kind of like top decking with your opponent. Also, again, basic land cycling, being able to get any basic land, helping you find your 3rd or potentially 4th color. Lasting Tarfire, 1 in a red, enchantment. Whenever at the beginning of each end step, if you put a counter on a creature this turn, this enchantment deals 2 damage to each opponent. It feels like there's enough like good blight things in this format where you could probably make, if you had like a few lasting tar fires, like this could probably just be a strategy in limited all of its own. And it might even be like a decent-ish card in standard because you just need to put a counter on a creature. It doesn't have to be a minus counter. It can be a +1/+1 counter. Lava Leaper, 4 mana, 4/4. All creatures have haste. Whenever a player taps a basic land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of that type that land produced. If mono green landfall wasn't like a big thing in this, you could probably make Lava Leaper a card that's like pretty one-sided, and you could just play like a bunch of like massive creatures and like a mono red strategy. That said, like just the fact that like mono green is like pretty big, I think doesn't necessarily stop this from seeing play. But does make it a little bit more dangerous when, you have things like, they're already able to make a ton of mana, and like, just imagine if they could effortlessly make even more and just kind of like go and do all kinds of crazy things and not have to tap their creatures to do that sort of thing. But like outside of that, really, giving all creatures haste, kind of whatever. This is just ends up kind of like, being like the drawback, I think, on top of just also being a card that's kind of like group hug-y feeling. Meek Attack, 2 in a red enchantment. You pay 1 in a red. You may put a creature with total power and toughness 5 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste, and you exile it. Or at the beginning of the next end step, you sacrifice that creature. We talked about putting clones into play with this. They have 0 power, 0 toughness, so you're able to, virtually put in a 6/6. There's creatures that are 0/0s that get +1/+1 counters when they enter. You have like different recruiter type creatures that can go and get other creatures that you can put with the Meek Attack. So like the first activation doesn't put like a very threatening creature into play, but it does end up putting in, does allow you to end up going and find something that does do a little bit more devastating things with Meek Attack. On top of like other like expensive creatures that have low power and toughness, I've seen people talk about putting in like Master of Cruelties with this, so then you're able to put your opponent to 1 instead of paying like 5 mana and waiting your turn, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So Meek Attack does have a lot of good useful applications. Hard to beat Sneak Attack, but it is a card that does come down a little bit earlier, and you're able to, potentially activate it multiple times. We play this on turn 3, play your 4th land, you're able to do this a few times. You're going to feel in pretty good shape, I would say. Also, like, beautiful art, once again. Reckless Ransacking, 1 in a red, target creature gains +3/+2 until end of turn, create a treasure token. So you can get a little bit of a rebate here where you're going to spend 2 mana up front. You're going to be able to get 1 mana back. Pretty neat. +3/+2 also is, I'd say, pretty good. Like for a like 1 mana, like +3/+2. And then you can then generate like a mana of any color, or you potentially just bank the mana as well, like as like a weird kind of ramp spell with this. I think it's better than what it looks like. Scuzzback, Scrounger, 1 in a red for a 3/2. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may blight 1. If you do, create a treasure token. So this is going to virtually be like a type of ramp for you. In the worst case, your creature kills like your 1-drop, then like you're able to at least put 1 counter on this and make a treasure token before having to put something else on the battlefield to put counters on, or you're just going to kill the Scuzzback for the second treasure. Seer, 2 mana, instant speed, deal 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Just a great removal spell. Like this is definitely going to see constructed play. Sizzling Changeling, 2 in a red for a 3/2. Changeling, when this creature dies, you exile the top card of your library. You may play that until the next turn. Fine, like has relevant, obviously has all the relevant creature types, but as a creature that you want to have die, so like you could definitely get some value off of blighting this thing, but then you want to blight enough to like kill this thing and not just, put counters on it unless you're doing kind of like the Scuzzbuck Scrounger thing where you're getting something out of it. You definitely want this to die so you can get that extra card. Soulbright Seeker, 1 red. As additional cost, you pay 2 or behold an elemental. You can pay a red, and target creature you control gains trample until end of turn. If this is the 3rd time this ability resolves, you add 4 red. So, like, you can give multiple creatures trample, obviously, and then get a bunch of mana back. Potentially even pay more mana to do this. But the ability has to resolve, so, like, your opponent could kind of put you in like a weird scenario where like maybe you only like you want to use this as like a ramp, so and you're like, all right, activate it once, activate it twice, go to activate the 3rd time, all right, kill Soulbright Seeker or whatever, and potentially make things, actually it probably doesn't even really make things awkward. I think it just like you end up still getting the mana, but in either case, You know, you could use this as like a weird ritual in the worst case. Soul Immolation, 3 and double red. As an additional cost to cast the spell, Blight X. X can't be greater than the toughness among creatures you control. Soul Immolation deals X damage to each opponent and each creature they control. So you could potentially blight your whole board full of toughness things to then like one-shot your opponent. Obviously, like the one-shot capability of this is like playing a bunch of creatures that have high toughness. Which, you know, again, is more than fine if you're paying 5 mana to win the game. That seems pretty good. But in general, you know, having to have this be like for Blight 4, a Blight 5, and, you know, potentially kill like one of your creatures. But you put X-1 counters on a creature you control. Can be the greatest toughness among creatures you control. I guess that would be a little bit harder. Bossing Say, here we come. Sour Bread Auntie, 2 and double red for a 4/3. When this creature enters, you may blight 2. If you do, you create 2 1/1 black goblin creature token, red and black goblin creature tokens. So, I mean, this is a creature that you want to do multiple times. I mean, like this with like the Auntie that we looked at earlier. Of course, like the name I can't remember. Like this, I mean, you blight 2 onto this, you make 2 1/1s, and then you go and attack with, or you go and flip the creature, you put a counter on this, and then you just get a token copy of this that makes 2 more 1/1s. You blight onto it, and then you pick it up later, and you just keep it pushing. This is the potential to make like a ton of goblin tokens, and again, when they can go wide, and they definitely punish your opponent, and can also, when they just have like 2 power or 3 power, that are infinitely more annoying. You know, pretty good spot. Spine Rock Tyrant, 3 and 2 red for a 6/6 flying wither dragon. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell with a single target, you may copy it. If you do, those spells gain wither. You may choose new targets for their copy. So you can have one copy end up dealing damage, and then another copy that ends up dealing wither. So then they're just going to deal minus counters, 2 things. There's like a Boros Dragons deck that would seem pretty popular, and you know, I don't think it's really playing any of the damage spells, but you know, you can just like find an avenue where you're fine with like doubling up essentially on your spells, and in the worst case, like burn spells just go to your opponent's face twice. Squawk Roaster is 3 and a red for a star 4 double strike. When its power and toughness is equal to the number of colors among permanents you control, so obviously you give this up to a 5/4 with double strike. That's a lot of damage. Like really, like this being like a 2/4 double striker for 4 mana, or like a 3, like you probably want this to be like a 3/4 double striker on the turn that you play it. Like to feel probably pretty good about it. Like it's a decent amount of toughness. Like this would be a pretty good creature if you can get up to like 3 or 4. Obviously, like the more power the better, but like really, if you can have it reliably like 3 or 4, this is going to be a fine card. Sting Slinger, 2 and a red for a 3/3, 1 and a red. Tap it, blight 1. This creature deals 2 damage to each opponent, so you could potentially deal 6 damage to your opponents with just the Sting Slinger. But this is a card that you can just slowly like ping your opponent over time, or I guess ding them for 2 over time, while also again putting these minus counters on creatures you control. Tweeze, 2 and a red, deals 2 damage to any target. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Worst case scenario, you go to your opponent's face, ditch a land, end up drawing, hopefully getting some action or like upgrading that land. So, you know, that's got to feel pretty good. Probably like a really good limited card here. I'd say this is probably one of the better, like probably one of the best red commons in the set. Warren Torchmaster, 1 and a red for 2/2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may blight 1. When you do, target creature gains haste until end of turn. So you can blight onto one creature and then give another creature you control haste. Even needing to do this, I think, on the house once by putting the counter on it and then giving another creature haste. Totally fine. Obviously, even in like Goblin as well, there's some, obviously, like giving your best creature, like, you know, being able to give like your 3 and 4 mana creatures haste are going to be pretty good. This is probably like a pretty fine uncommon. All right, green, the last color. And it's probably going to take forever. Assert Perfection, 1 and a green. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. So another fight spell that you're going to be able to also then basically be able to kill up to 1 toughness higher than the power of the creature that you have. These like punch spells are great. I think they're bite. There's like Fight and Bite. I think this ends up being like a bite spell that is, you know, pretty good removal for green, especially. Aurora Awakener for 6 and a green, trample. It's a 7/7 with Vivid. When this creature enters, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X permanent cards, where X is the color among permanents you control. Put any number of those permanents onto the battlefield and put the rest in the bottom of the reveal cards at the bottom of your library in a random order. A creature that your opponent's very scared to bounce and let you replay over and over again. This is probably a creature where if you can do it, like if you have like 2 colors in play, like 2 or 3 colors, you're going to feel pretty good about it. Because, I mean, obviously there's a potentially you just end up revealing lands, and that doesn't end up being all that great. There's also probably some weird combo potential with some MDFCs and everything like that. Obviously, that's a lot of work to put in for it, and the fact that you have to have permanents with all colors. I mean, we do have the Leyline of the Guild Pact as well that can give all of our permanents all colors, and it itself is all colors. So I mean, you could very easily find a way to play this like pretty early and get the max amount of permanents you can get from it. Bloom Tender, 1 and a green, Vivid. You tap it, and for each color among permanents you control, you add 1 mana to that color. So it's a dork that can potentially add 5 mana to your mana pool, 1 of each color. Do with that information what you will. This is also a reprint. Very fine mana dork, and mythic nonetheless too. Pretty crazy, and some very sweet art. Blossoming Defense, another reprint. 1 green, target creature you control gets +2/+2 and has hexproof until end of turn. Obviously, we have Snakeskin Veil. This is like one of the defensive spells that feels like it can be more aggressive. And I kind of like that because even though like Snakeskin Veil gives you a permanent +1/+1, sometimes you just want like the extra damage that you can deal with something like a Blossoming Defense. So Blossoming Defense being here is pretty nice. Bristlebane Battler. 1 and a green for 6/6, trample, ward 2 with 5 -1/-1 counters when it enters. And whenever another creature you control enters while this creature has -1/-1 counters on it, you remove those counters. Another great way to remove potentially multiple counters on it on a turn. We have that white enchantment way back when, where you make 2 1/1s. So this ends up being like a 3/3 with trample, like on the 3rd turn, and then potentially even bigger as you play more spells or as you have more creatures. Bristlebane Outrider, 3 and a green for a 3/5. This creature can be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. As long as another creature entered the battlefield under your control this turn, this creature gets +2/+0. So this is a 4/4 or a 4 mana 3/5 that could potentially be a 5/5 on the turn that it attacks. Again, being fairly aggressive, and isn't going to get chump blocked by your opponent's smaller creatures, making it very likely that you end up at the very, like in the best case scenario, trading with like a big creature or forcing your opponent to chump block with something a little bit bigger. Celestial Reunion, X and green. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may choose a creature type and behold 2 creatures of that type. You search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less, you reveal it and put it into your hand, and then shuffle. If the spell's additional cost was paid, the revealed card is and the revealed card is the chosen type, put that card onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your hand. Obviously, a less restrictive Green Sun Zenith and what you can get, but it only goes onto the battlefield if it follows the creature types of the cards that you beholded. So I would say for like green, of course, elves is like the first thing that comes to my mind, just because they're like cheap things, like paying 3 or 4 mana for something like this and getting to behold 2 of them and getting like an Elvish Archdruid in play or anything like that ends up like kind of going a long way and is something that is relatively attainable for these decks to do. So I think Celestial Union in that case ends up kind of accomplishing its job of being a very good creature tutor that can kind of scale to the early, mid, and late game, obviously because of the X cost in it. But at the cost of, you know, for it to be kind of a better Green Sun Zenith, you need to play into like a certain creature type. So, yeah, I think constructed wise, it's there. It just is going to be very hard to, I think, justify this card just in general being something that players want to play. Champion of the Perfect, 3 and a green. As an initial cost, behold an elf and exile it. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. 4 mana 6/6 is huge. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, you draw a card. Like, this is totally fine. Like, I think a lot of these you want to kind of play as soon as possible. Or, like, at least you're kind of fine with playing them as soon as possible. This feels really good if you're able to play it And then obviously on top of it, you're going to be able to draw multiple cards. But this is also fine if you play it and then you play like any one of your mana dorks after, you especially spend 5 mana, you exile an elf, or, you behold an elf and you exile it, and then you get to draw a card after playing another one and just kind of keep snowballing. And the fact too that, yeah, you want to be an elf to cast this card because you need to behold one of them, but even if you're not like fully into the elf synergies, then, you're just casting creature spells and getting to draw cards. Like, I think this might be one of the best champions of the bunch. Chomping Changeling, 2 and a green. Changeling, when this creature enters, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. It's a 1/2. Pretty good. Like, honestly. And then again, like, getting to pick this up and do the thing again and again with some of the other cards that we've seen. Also makes it a fairly attractive card. Again, when you consider that it just has all the creature kind of synergies and things like that. Crossroad Watcher, 2 and a green. Kithkin Ranger for 3/3. Trample, whenever another creature enters, this creature gets +1/+0. Another aggressive like Kithkin creature that if you can put multiple bodies in play, it being a 5/3 or 6/3, is going to be able to trample over a lot of your opponent's creatures, and they're actually going to have to put a decent number of bodies or put like one of their bigger creatures in front of this and trade with it. Dawn's Light Archer, 2 and a green for a 4/2. Flash, Reach. Good way to surprise some flying creatures, especially like the fairies are going to be very annoyed by this for the fact that it's going to, you're going to attack with a bunch of them. You're going to be able to kill like one of them for free basically, and worry about picking off the other ones as you go. Dundulin Weaver, 1 and a green for a 2/1. When this creature enters, if you control 3 or more creatures, you return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Obviously, incentivizing you to go as wide as possible, and a card that you don't necessarily want to play on turn 2. In your curve, you want to be able to play it a little bit later, and then this could potentially get back a permanent card that your opponent like killed off with something like a Chomping Changeling or whatever. Some very good like permanents, I would say, in the format. Formidable Speaker is John Emmanuel DePraz World Championship card. It is a 2 and a green for a 2/4. When this creature enters, you may discard a card, and if you do, you search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it in your hand, then shuffle. You can pay 1 and tap it to untap another target permanent. It's an elf druid. It's going to fit perfectly in the elf strategy because you have plenty of elves that you want to untap and generate tons of mana with to then activate all the incredibly great abilities that a lot of elves have, or just cast like a Craterhoof Behemoth as you do. And then the fact that you get this kind of like survival effect on this, but you can discard any card to then search for a creature. Just having that flexibility is really nice. And if elves are played in the format, I have a hard time believing that Formidable Speaker isn't like at the center of that strategy. Guildleaf's Embrace, 2 and a green, enchant creature, as flash. Enchanted creature gains trample and indestructible in a turn. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0. So it's a combat trick that is also continues to be aggressive as well, which I do really like. This is going to be able to trade up on top of course, surviving combat. So not even really trade up, but like kill creatures bigger than it, survive combat with the indestructible, and like this is even better if you attack with it and then enchant your creature, because your opponent like blocks with a 1/1. Well, guess what? I trample over and I deal a ton of damage. Your opponent like blocks with a big creature. Well, guess what? Like I win combat and maybe I get over for a damage or 2 as well. So I think this is like a great combat trick. Great Force Druid, 1 and a green for an 0/4 that taps to add 1 mana of any color. This is fine. This is like a good mana dork. Good amount of toughness. Allows you to be pretty defensive and then also ramp into some of your other bigger things a turn earlier. Luminalisk, 3 and a green for a 2/4 Death Touch. When this creature enters, you gain life equal to the number of color among permanents you control. 4 mana 2/4 with Death Touch is okay. Like, fine to okay, I would say. And then, like, gaining a little bit of life, too. Kind of whatever. I could take it or leave this. I think even if you gain, like, all 5 life, unless your opponent is specifically playing, like, an aggressive, like, small creature deck, I think the life gain is going to be not that good. And then you're going to more like the high toughness, like, Death Toucher than you are like gaining the life. Lissalana Dignitary, 1 green for a 2/3 is an additional cost to cast. Behold an elf for pay 2. You can tap it to add 2 mana. Activate, there's only an elf card in your graveyard. Now this is the 2-drop that I can get behind, where you're playing like the elf strategy and your opponent kills your 2 mana elf. You play this, you behold like a 3 mana elf in your hand, and then you have a creature that's going to be able to tap for 2 mana, and it's going to have 3 toughness rather than 2, which is pretty big in standard. Of course, it still gets like combustion technique if your opponent use like the other 1 mana spell to get rid of the elf. But like outside of those scenarios, like the Dignitary probably has a chance of being able to tap for 2 mana on your next turn and giving you 4 or 5 mana worth of creatures to cast instead of it gives you like 4 or 5 mana worth of mana to like cast things. Lissalana in format, 1 green for a 3/1. This enters or dies. Surveil 1. We've seen this a few times in standard in these limited formats. Just a fine creature. Midnight Telling, 1 green, mill 4 cards, and you return a permanent card from among them to your hand. Obviously, we've seen like things like Lissalana Dignitary, and there's also the black like 4 mana elf that we looked at that cared about elf cards being in the graveyard. You know, there's plenty of things that you can use to pick up creatures and get permanents from the graveyard, bring them into your hand. So getting the mill cards, and then this also getting a permanent back while also having synergy with all the other graveyard things going on is pretty nice. And it's probably like a pretty good card, I would say. This probably ends up being a pretty good card. Even then, like just milling 4 cards can be a lot, even for constructed, and getting a permanent back and doing those things is going to be pretty nice. Miss Meadow Council, 4 green for a 4/3. This costs 1 less to cast, and as you control a Kithkin, so it potentially costs 4 mana. And then when this creature enters, you draw a card. 4 mana, like 4 mana for a 4/3, draw a card. Like that's fine. That's okay. Like probably like filler level creature, I would say. Filler level is like bottom of like the playability in terms of like limited. It doesn't cost 1 less to cast for each one, so obviously it's not like an insane where you get like a 1 mana 4/3, but like this is fine. Moon Vigil, Adherence, 2 and 2 green for 0/0. Trample, this creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control and each creature card in your graveyard. So this is an elf that, even if you're not doing the elf thing, if you're in green, well, guess what? You have a ton of creatures in your graveyard, you're going to get a big creature. I think this is going to end up being pretty good. Like the fact that you could, it gets +1/+1, so it's kind of on a sliding scale of like, I'm saying like, okay, like this is a 4/4 right now, but I can mill 4 cards and I can potentially make this an 8/8. You know, like I think that ends up being, it ends up being pretty good. And again, in limited, like just over the course of playing a game, you're going to get tons of creatures in your graveyard. This being 8/8 or a 9/9 Trampler with all the things kind of going on in the set, that's going to end up being pretty good. Morkant's Eyes, 1 green. At the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 1. You pay 4 and double green. Sacrifices enchantment. You create X/2/2 black and green elf creature tokens, where X is the number of elf cards in your graveyard. Holy crap! So like this is fine. Like the enchantment, like surveil 1 at the beginning of your upkeep. I mean, it's an enchantment that does nothing on turn 2, but you want to play this as soon as possible. And then also just unfortunately you have to activate as a sorcery, but like paying 6 mana and getting, you know, potentially 7, 8, 9 2/2 elves again with a creature type that does buff themselves very well. This ends up being pretty insane. Like this could be like a really good like enchantment that ends up being kind of like a finisher that also smooths out your draws. That smooths out your draws in the limited format. Mutable Explorer, 2 green, 1/1 changeling. When this creature enters, you create a tap Mutavault token that it's a land with tap to add a colorless mana, and 1, it becomes a 2/2 with all creature types until end of turn. You want to copy this thing a bunch. You get extra landfall triggers from this too, which is really interesting. So this potentially has some constructed playability in like those green landfall decks. For the fact that, again, it does just produce an extra land and does eventually become a win condition. And when you earthbend onto these like Mutavaults and stuff, you can then activate them for 1 mana and you have a 4/4, you know, that you can, or like a 3/3 in the case of a 3/3. Even though they do get a little bit worse, because then I would assume that since they're tokens and they die from being earthbended, that they don't come back. Pitiless Fist, 3 and a green, enchant creature you control. When this aura enters, it fights up to one target creature an opponent controls, and the enchanted creature gets +2/+2. Another just solid removal spell, like +2/+2 on something, and then being able to fight and kill like a decent sized creature is going to end up working out pretty well in your favor. Prism Basher, 4 and 2 green for trample, 6/6 vivid. This enters up to X target creatures you control get +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. So obviously +1/+1 to 1, +2/+2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, and so on. Again, like if you can get this to 4, like this one is like a great one if you can get it up to 4. Prismatic Undercurrents, 3 and a green for a vivid enchantment. When this enters, you search up for X basic land cards, or X is the number of permanents, colors among permanents you control. Reveal those cards, you put them in your hand, then shuffle, and you can play an additional land on each of your turns. So you can search, so like if you can search for like 3 or 4 basic lands, and then potentially play, 2 lands after that, so you don't have to discard. But, I mean, like, this is also just going to be, like, a fine way. This generally isn't all that good in Limited, getting to do this sort of thing. But, like, getting to play additional lands, like, as long as you're at parity, I guess, or maybe even, maybe a little behind, like, a little behind in either direction or at parity, like, this is probably fine. Like, you can take a turn off and then just, like, generate a ton of mana on like the next turn and find a way to close that gap that you potentially created by playing this. But this card absolutely sucks if you're behind. Pummeler for Hire, 4 and a green for a 4/4 Vigilance Reach. Ward 2, when this creature enters, you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among giants you control. So this is potentially the 5 mana 4/4, gain 4 life. 2 pretty good keywords. Ward, your opponent's basically going to have a harder time killing it. And if they do, they're going to spend a ton of mana to do so. Safe Right Cavalry, 3 and a green for a 4/4. This creature can't be blocked by more than one creature. 5 mana, target elf you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Mana Sink for later in the game, and the fact that it's an elf means it can also get targeted by its own ability. Can't be blocked by more than one creature. Your opponent, even if they have like any giants or whatever, you have enough mana, you get sink into this and kill their giants in combat. Sapling Nursery, 6 and double green, affinity for forests. Landfall, when a land enters, you create a 3/4 tree folk creature token with reach. 1 and a green, you exile this enchantment, and tree folk and forest you control gain indestructible until end of turn. You could do like one-sided like Armageddons with this. You can obviously in the landfall stuff, you can end up making a ton of 3/4s, which end up being infinitely threatening. This ends up being really cheap, especially if you're really into playing forests. And you don't have to be playing basic forest. You can be playing any of the dual lands that have the forest basic land type. And you get to protect those tree folks and potentially lands you control from getting blown up. Sign me up. I think this card's actually constructed playable. I think this card is going to see a good amount of play because, I mean, I imagine just playing against like these slower decks and like, okay, like I'm just going to make a 3/4 every single turn or multiple 3/4s a turn because it just cares about playing extra lands. Like this is going to be something that I think in my gut feels like the closest thing to like a sure thing for seeing play in Standard. Selfless Safe Right, 3 and double green for a 4/2 flash with Convoke. This creature enters, you choose a creature type. Other permanents you control of that type gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Again, like when you're doing like the elf thing, and this doesn't necessarily have to pertain to just the elf thing, but when you're doing that sort of thing, you're able to, in board states that are, relatively locked up, this is going to be a way that you can, not only that, but like protect your stuff, like bait your opponent into playing like a board wipe, and then you play this and your things are indestructible, or you're able to protect one of your other creatures and then potentially kill your opponent on the backswing. Which is something that I really like there. I'm not sure if it's like actually constructed playable though. I like 5 mana. Like the stats kind of suck. 5 mana is quite a bit, but like I guess if you're able over the course of turns, like attack with all your things, leave up your mana, and then just cast this, it ends up being pretty good. So it's obviously all dependent on if we see more control decks kind of taking shape, because this card is probably only going to be good if you are able to counter in a way like a really expensive spell or stop multiple spells. And a lot of the time you're not going to stop multiple spells with this. You're going to look to like stop a big mana thing. Shimmer Wild's Growth, 1 and a green, enchant land. As an aura enters, choose this color. Enchanted land is the chosen color, and whenever an enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of the additional color. So this ends up being kind of like a Utopia Sprawl, but like the land also gains that color, which also goes with like a lot of the vivid stuff that we see in the set as well. Shimmer Wilds feels like a good card. I mean, like the fact that this is like technically ramp, on top of giving you like adding like a color to a thing that in general like never has color added to it, for some of the other things going on in limited. Like this is fine. Like this is a card that I could see that toes the line between like being played in limited because like it is ramp and it also goes with some of the extra like color things going on, but then also, you know, like this thing being in standard and, you know, there are, you know, with John Emmanuel DePraz card or whatever, like you can potentially add tons of mana with this, like in Badgermole Cub and Earthbending, like the land that has this, you know, there's a lot of like a decent amount of hoops to kind of go through for this to like be even more insane than what it is. But nonetheless, like it still feels like something that could be like on the fringes of constructed playable. Spry and Mighty, I love the pun for this, but 4 and a green, choose two creatures you control, draw X cards, and the chosen creatures get +X/+X and gain trample until end of turn, where X is the difference between the chosen creature's powers. So obviously you want like a really big creature and like a wall basically. So then you can give those creatures, you know, a lot of power and toughness and they gain trample. And then on top of that, you end up drawing a bunch of cards because you want the difference to be massive. Sorcery speed obviously hurts this card a lot, as it does a lot of other cards. And, you know, the fact that you choose 2 creatures is kind of nice. So I mean, like, I guess there's ways that you could kind of make this work. Like in limited, like, if you just end up like getting to draw 4 or 5 cards off of this, and of course put, you know, an extra 8 to 10 power into play, like you could probably just kill your opponent. And if you don't, then like they're close to dead, and you're up like 5 or 6 cards. Shirley Farrier, 1 and a green for 2/2. You tap, target creature gets +1/+0 in vigilance, or +1/+1 in vigilance until on turn, only activate as a sorcery. Fine to make some of your big things just play offense and defense, and then you're not reserved to it being a Kithkin, it's just any creature you control. 10 the Sprigs, 2 and a green, search your library, basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, and if you control 7 or more lands and or tree folk cards, Tree Folk, create a 3/4 Tree Folk creature token with reach. A ramp spell that you're fine with playing on turn 3, and it does the thing. And then on top of that, it does, like, when you go and do the thing, it pays you off for having more lands or building into it a certain way. So I like the fact that this is a ramp spell that does more than just ramp after a certain point. Thoughtweft Charge, 1 and a green, target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If a creature entered the battlefield under your control this turn, draw a card. So like this is another, like, you know, you play a thing, you attack, and then you potentially blow out your opponent with the pump spell, and you get the card back from playing the pump spell. Hard to be mad at that. Tristan Callous Cultivator, 2 and a green, Death Touch. When this creature enters or transforms into Tristan Callous Cultivator, you mill 3 cards, and then if there's an elf card in your graveyard, you gain 2 life. You can pay a black to transform him. And then on the back, it's a 3/4 with Death Touch, and then when it transforms into Tristan Penitent Color, you mill 3 cards, and then you may exile an elf card from your graveyard, and if you do, each opponent loses 2 life. So, like, a way that you can mill card, obviously, we've seen, you know, there's one spell in particular where you name a creature type, and then you get all creatures of that type, you know, from your graveyard to the battlefield. So Tristan could definitely feed into that sort of thing by being able to flip-flop back and forth and just mill cards. Even when you transform, you know, into Penitent Color, you end up milling more cards, and you flip back, you mill more cards, you're able to gain life and stuff like that. And like a 3/4 is a pretty big body spell for 3 mana. So probably on the fringes of, you know, like I think a different style of like elf strategy is where you're at with this Callous Cultivator, but nonetheless, like, still pretty good. Like, you know, decently fair. On top of that too, like, you could just flip back and forth, mill cards, gain life, flip it over, drain your opponent for 2, and do that thing, and then like kind of like burn out your opponent in a way. Unforgiving Aim, 2 and a green, choose 1, destroy target creature with flying, destroy target enchantment, create a 2/2 black-green elf creature token. You know, again, a creature that has some variety. We see this with like Paw Patch formation, where you like draw a card, make a food token, destroy a creature with flying, destroy an enchantment. This costs 1 more mana than that, but you end up making a 2/2 and then sometimes the creature token is just fine. Mindbread Brawler, 2 and a green for a 4/2, must be blocked if able. When this creature attacks another elf you control, gets +2/+1 until end of turn. A way that you can kind of force your opponents to like block this creature, and they kind of have that decision, like, do I block with my big creature so I just can kind of eat the Brawler, or do I like chump block with a smaller creature and let my opponent get more of the buffs? And this is like a creature where, is kind of ripe for, kind of like the Prize Unicorn, like sort of tricks where it's like, okay, boom, like I'm going to play my pump spell on this, like I'm going to eat your big creature, and then this is going to be able to continue to buff my creatures later on. Virulent Emissary, an upgraded version of like Elvish, there's like an elf from like, I think Planar Chaos or whatever, that is a 1-mana 1/1 that whenever another creature under your control, you gain a life. This one just has Death Touch, so it's a very slight upgrade to this card. I mean, I could actually trade with something in combat. Wildvine Pummeler, 6 and green. This costs 1 less for each color among permanents you control, trample, reach. So it can be a 2-mana 6/5. I think if you get this to like 4 mana, if you have 2 colors in play, 3 ideally, like a 3 mana for a 6/5 reach trample is an absolutely insane rate. Multicolors, Deep Channel Duelist. We're almost done. White and a blue for a 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, untap target merfolk you control. Other merfolk you control get +1/+1. We've seen plenty of merfolk that care about tapping, and they get to do something when they tap. So this is a creature that you can untap those creatures, and then if you have another way to tap them, then you're going to get to double up on those things, on top of being a lord for your merfolk in the absolute worst case to allow them to be a little bit more aggressive. Deepway Navigator, white and a blue for 2/2 flash. When this enters, untap each other merfolk you control, and as long as you attack with 3 or more merfolk this turn, merfolk you control get +1/+0. So another creature that is going to buff your merfolk creatures, especially if you attack with them. And then entering is going to allow these to untap, and then you're going to be able to use all of your, like, tap down all of your things to like do the convoke thing, and then spend mana to play this to untap them. You get your value from tapping the creatures. You're going to untap them and then potentially get to attack with them to also give them the power buff, and then also getting all the tap things. So like merfolk definitely seems like it's pretty set up nicely with the uncommon and the rare to do some pretty busted things on certain turns with the tap abilities they have. Eclipse Mirror is a 3 hybrid blue-red or blue-white. When this creature enters, you look at the top 4 cards of the library, reveal a merfolk, plains, or island card from among them, put it in your hand, the rest of the bottom of the library in an order. Very solid in this archetype, and again, these hybrid mana symbols, so you're able to, like, I mean, not ideal, but you're able to play these and get some of your value from the Vivid. If you're not playing blue-white, if you're playing like blue-red, then this gives you a white permanent. Mirror Sky Swimmer, 3 and 2 hybrid white-black or white-blue. Convoke Flying Vigilance, and when this creature enters, you create a 1/1 white and blue merfolk creature token. It's a 2/2. Nothing to write home about, but a card that's like fine to kind of pick up because it's another one that'll make another merfolk token. 6 command, 1 a white and a blue for a kindred sorcery merfolk. Create a token that's a copy of target merfolk you control. There's a lot of very powerful merfolk in this set. Creatures target player controls gain lifelink until end of turn. Target player draws a card. Tap target creature, put a stun counter on it. I think this is, I'd have to look through all the other ones obviously, but this command feels like it's just, in general, it's pretty good. Whether, I think there's 3 modes that you don't have to necessarily be in merfolk, and then there's one that you obviously benefit greatly from if you're in merfolk. Like giving creatures that you control lifelink, like fine, in those matchups where, it can definitely swing a race. Like target player draws a card, like, okay, you cycle the command and then you tap a creature. Like draw a card, tap a creature, and then it's stunned, giving you 2 turns of it just, essentially being out of commission. I mean, like, sign me up. I think that this card just in general is just like a pretty good command, all things considered. Deceit, 4 and hybrid, 2 hybrid blue and black. When this creature enters, if double blue was spent to cast it, return up to one other target non-land permanent to his owner's hand. If double black was spent to cast it, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it and discard that card, and you can evoke it for 2 hybrid blue or black. So ideally, you can evoke this and get either one of these abilities, or you can pay its full cost and get both, and you're not going to get one or either of the abilities if you blink it or anything like that. Obviously, fixing quote unquote like the thing with evoke, where you could evoke it and then flicker it, and then you get 2 ETBs and the creatures stick around for a discounted cost. Dream Harvest, 5 and blue-black, 2 blue-black hybrid. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they have exiled cards with a total mana value 5 or greater this way. And until end of turn, you may cast cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. Obviously, a big flashy sorcery that has the potential to either cast one big spell or a bunch of other smaller spells, or more, because obviously you could exile like 5 or greater total worth of cost. Probably not constructed playable unless you're able to like turbo this out relatively quickly, like most expensive cards. But I mean, like the mana value, like total mana value is higher. Like if this was like 10 or greater, I mean, this card would be absolutely insane. Like this could be a card that you could feasibly like end the game with. Mischievous Sneakling, 1 and a hybrid blue-black for a changeling flash. You know, this is whatever. Like, it being flash, like, it having all creature types is, like, the best part about this card. A Voracious Tome Skimmer, triple, hybrid, blue-black, flash. Whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, you may pay a life. If you do, draw a card. The fact that this is an option to draw a card off of this is nice, because there's a lot of times where you could potentially be in a position where you want to interact with your opponent's cards, but you can't afford to, because then you'll like lose the life and draw a card or whatever, or it's going to make things a little bit dicier. The fact that you get the option to pay the life when you do the thing to draw a card is just kind of like a nice thing, even if you're going to do this like 95% of the time where you're going to want to draw the card. Bogart, Curse Crafter, a black and a red for a 2/3 with Death Touch. Whenever another goblin you control dies, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So just a way that you can blight onto your goblins, kill them, drain your opponent, and like another way that you can deal damage to your opponent without attacking with your goblins. Chaos Spewer, 2 and a hybrid black-red. When this creature enters, you may pay 2. If you don't, you blight 2. So it ends up being like a 3 mana, like 3/2 if you don't pay the extra 2. Or you can just like blight onto another creature and like deal damage to them with like Bogart Curse Crafter. Eclipse Bogart, triple hybrid black-red. When this creature enters, you look at the top 4. You may reveal a goblin, swamp, or mountain card from among the cards and put them into your hand. The rest on the bottom in random order. Like another, I think there's like a whole cycle of these for like the given creature types. You know, these are just solid. These are solid cards, have the potential to find dual lands if you open them up in your sealed pool or in your draft. And then also just getting to look for like a goblin. I mean, obviously there's a lot of good goblins, a lot of good merfolks, elves, things like that. You're going to want this, definitely want like 1 or 2 of these if you can in your limited decks. Grub's Command, 3, a black and a red for a kindred sorcery goblin. Create a token that's a copy of target goblin you control. All right, that can be pretty powerful. Creatures target player controls get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. Destroy target artifact or creature. Target player mills 5 cards and puts each goblin card milled this way into their hand. So, like this one can be pretty explosive. Like obviously you could do like you could create a copy of like a Siege King commander, and then like creatures target player controls like yourself are going to get +1/+1 and gain haste. So you're going to be able to. I guess you won't be able to actually give the goblin tokens haste. This one's a little bit weirder with the creating tokens and then doing the thing. But, you know, in either case, like there's some goblins that have really good ETBs that you want to copy. Grub's Command can do that. It can also do its own impression of like a goblin ringleader by being able to potentially draw you multiple cards by milling a ton of goblins. Being just creature removal, totally fine. But this one is definitely more focused on being in goblins, where I think like 6 Command is definitely like a card that, you know, obviously isn't going to get its full potential not being in a merfolk deck, but is a card that could see play like outside of the merfolk strategy. Shadow Urchin, 2 and a hybrid black-red. Whenever this creature attacks, you blight 1. Whenever a creature you control with 1 or more counters on it dies, you exile that many cards on the top of your library until your next end step. You may play those cards. 3 mana, 3/4 is a nice body. Being able to, again, put those counters on your creatures, and then if they end up like dying, either by having too many -1/-1 counters put on them, or you just being able to sacrifice them, then you're going to be able to get some card advantage because you're going to be able to exile multiple cards depending on how many counters that the creature had. Gangling, Stompling, 2 and a hybrid green-red. Changeling, Trample, like a whatever creature to me personally. Like, this is just whatever, I guess. Noggle Robber, a 1 and 2 hybrid green-red. When this creature enters or dies, you create a treasure token. It's a 3/3. Honestly, solid body, makes a treasure token, so you're going to ramp a little bit, and then like you're fine with like trading it off almost immediately to get that treasure token to cast like whatever giant thing that you can cast on the next turn, way ahead of schedule. Rating schemes, 3 green and a red. Non-creatures you control, non-creature spells you cast have Conspire. So as you cast a non-creature spell, you can tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with the spell. You copy and you choose new targets for the copy, and the copy of a permanent spell becomes a non-token. Of a permanent becomes a token. So non-creature spells you cast have Conspire. So obviously like instant sorceries, enchantments, artifacts, those sort of things, but we have plenty of those that end up making other tokens. So, I mean, there we go. Vibrance, the goodest boy, the goodest elemental of all these. 3, and then a double hybrid green and red. If double red was paid, you deal 3 damage to any target. If double green was paid, you search your library for a land card, put it to your hand, and then shuffle. You gain 2 life, and then, of course, evoke for the hybrid red and green. So, being like a removal spell, while also being a card that can go and search up any land from your deck, and then like obviously it puts it to your hand. I think that there's a lot of good like utility lands that we still have in standard right now, and where I think that a lot of these elementals are going to see play because you can't like abuse their ETBs. And quite frankly, in like older formats, I don't know if you necessarily want to like cast these for like the full cost. Of course, someone can prove me wrong. But you know, just being able to like play this and search for a land that you want, and then also gain a little bit of life too, it's just very nice. Like I think this is just a solid card all around. I like this card early. I really like the dog version better. Brigade's Command, 1 or Brigid's Command. I think I said Brigid and I just called it Brigade. 1 green and a white. Choose 2 Kindred Sorcery, Kithkin. Create a token that's copied of target Kithkin you control. Target player creates a 1/1 green-white Kithkin creature token. Target creature you control gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Target creature you control fights another creature you control. Again, like this, now this command is one that I could see just, again, being one that could see play. Giving a creature +3/+3 and then having it fight something, like essentially making this like a removal spell that is also going to pump up your creature and get in for a decent amount of damage. Making a 1/1 and then having it fight like another 1/1 thing, or you know, any combination of these 3 are like fine. I think Sigs might honestly be better as like a standalone, but this is fine. Like this is just totally fine as like a standalone card. And obviously in Kithkin, there's some great ones that you want to copy, while also just being able to like fight other things too is going to work out very nicely. Eclipsed Kithkin, 2 hybrid green white. When this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library, get a Kithkin, Forest, or Plains card from among them. Again, I think all these are just really solid. Figure of Fable, I think these, like the Figure of Destiny and things like that, like I think these cards are just kind of like past their prime of like when they would actually be good in Magic. But, you know, I think this is like fine. Like this is just a good, like solid, like limited card. So 1 hybrid green-white, 1/1. You pay another hybrid green-white. This becomes a 2/3. You pay 1 and then a double green-white hybrid. It becomes a 4/5. And you have to pay, you know, these costs like before. So it becomes a Kithkin Scout. And then if this creature is a Scout, it becomes a Soldier. And then for 3 and then triple green-white, if it's a Soldier, it becomes a Kithkin Avatar with base power and toughness 7/8 and protection from each of your opponents. So, like, this is definitely worth the payoff of leveling this up. You get a 7/8 that's going to have protection from each of your opponents. meaning that like they can't be the target of spells or abilities that opponent could, or from your opponents. I don't know if it necessarily extends to, I think it might extend to like the creatures in that, but like a 7/8 is an absolute huge body and your opponent's just not going to be able to get it off the table. You have to invest a lot of mana, but at least in this case, like it feels like it's worth getting to that point if you have the extra mana lying around to do it. Even just getting it up to like a 4/5, it being a 2/3, like all these are just fine. It's just like constructed wise, I don't think that this card actually sees any constructed play. Thoughtwef Lieutenant, a green and white for a 2/2. When this creature enters or another Kithkin you control enters, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. This is fine as like a one-shot thing. But then also, like later on, like you're going to be able to make tokens, you're going to be able to grow creatures, and you're already big creatures, and then going to get trample and fight it, and, be able to get in for big damage. Beginning to do this with like giants, because we've seen giants in white, there's a few in green. If you can just find like these cheap big creatures and then like play Thoughtwef Lieutenant, give a trample one time, and then be able to play like other creatures and just continue to give those big creatures trample, or you'd be able to spread out the damage with the +1/+1 and be able to trample over some of the smaller creatures your opponent's playing. Is going to make it hard for them to kind of hold back like the Kithkin army. Wary Farmer, 1 and a double green-white hybrid. At the beginning of your end step of another creature enter the battlefield this turn at your control, surveil 1. 3/3, like getting to do this in an archetype where you're going to want to play creatures. This can just kind of help you find other creatures. Like I think just solid body all around. Obviously, like great creature type for like what it wants to do. So like I'm in for it. I think this is a solid limited card. Abigail, Eloquent First Year. This is probably the card I'm most excited for constructed. A double hybrid white-black. 1/1 flying first strike lifelink. When it enters, you choose up to one other target creature and it loses all abilities. You put a flying counter, a first strike counter, a lifelink counter on that creature. Obviously, neutering your opponent's best creature and giving it all these things, and then you're able to kill it is going to be totally fine. I think the creature itself is great. Having flying first strike and lifelink, you're fine with like also putting like counters and things like that onto it. But getting to do this to creatures that you own, like something like a Death Shadow, you end up having like a 13/13, and while it is kind of a non-bow with the other 3 Death Shadow in your deck, you have a 13/13 flying first strike lifelinking creature. Like you probably don't care as long as that creature gets you across the finish line. So I think there's like a ton of potential for this card to just like see play across multiple constructed formats, and probably is my pick to be the card that sees play in the most like constructed formats. Emptiness, one of the first cards that we ever seen spoiled in the set. 4 and then a double white and black hybrid. When this creature enters, if double white was spent to cast it, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If double black was spent, you put 3 -1/-1 counters off to one target creature. Great removal, or ends up getting back a smaller creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Either way, it's going to do both very efficiently. The body kind of sucks though if you spend like 6 mana for this. Like you're really going to be hoping that the double white and like putting counters on something and then also getting the creature back is going to have to pull a lot of weight. Prideful Feastling, 2 and a hybrid white-black, changeling, 2/3 lifelink. I think probably of these, this is probably like one of the better ones. Like 2/3 is a decent body for 3 mana, like lifelink, and again just having some of the changeling things. But this art, holy shit, like that is horrifying. Reaping Willow, 1 and triple white-black hybrid, 3/6 with lifelink, comes into play with 2 -1/-1 counters. You remove 2 counters from it, and you return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery, and here's like one of the best creatures that you can probably have to put counters on and then remove them from. A 3/6 is an absolutely huge body, so if you never blight onto this thing, it's just probably going to sit on the battlefield and make attacking very, very difficult for your opponent. Also, just being able to trade your smaller creatures and bring them back straight to the battlefield is also very nice, because I mean this could just have easily like went to the hand, and this might have still been okay, but putting them directly on the battlefield is awesome. Ashling's Command, 3 blue and red for a Kindred instant elemental. Create tokens, copy target elemental you control. Target player draws 2 cards, deals 2 damage to each creature target player controls, and a target player creates 2 treasure tokens. Honestly, like I might have already underestimated it. I think Ashling's Command might be just the best one, like period. Creating a copy of an elemental you control, like you can do some pretty interesting things with some of like the other like evoke elementals that probably end up having like a free cost, because obviously copying the Lorwyn Eclipse ones aren't going to be all that great. But like with that said, target player draws 2 cards. You get to Pyroclasm. Each creature target one-sided Pyroclasm. Create 2 treasure tokens. Like this is just a pretty good. Like this is just a good command all around. This is a very good command. And again, if you're able for any of these commands to leverage like creating a token copy of the associated creature, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Eclipse Flamekin. This one allows you to look at the top 4 for an elemental, island, or mountain. We've basically what I've said about this. I feel pretty good about it. Stats are decent. Flaring Cinder, 1 and a double blue-red hybrid. This creature enters whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. All right, so you can filter your hand and also just like getting to play big spells to continue to look for bigger other big spells. So now our innovative first year, 2 and a double blue-red hybrid. I'm pretty sure like this art just looks so familiar, but Vivid, at the beginning of your first main phase, you reveal cards from top of your library. You reveal X down land cards, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. For each of those colors, you may exile a card of that color from among the revealed cards and shuffle. You then cast you may cast the exile cards this turn. I think there was like some kind of like weird like meme, like 2-3 card combo with this. I think it was like a 2 card combo, because then you'd get 2 cards because the card itself is 2 colors. Not really exciting for me personally, at least when it comes to like 60 cards constructed. Probably just like a fine card in general. 20 Flame Travelers, 2 and a double blue, or 2 and then blue and red. Flying, if a triggered ability of an elemental you control triggers, it triggers an additional time. Ends up being a 3/3. 4 mana 3/3 flyer, fine. Getting to double up on like the Impact Tremor like type triggers, or like even like Eclipse Flamekin. Being able to look at the top 4, get one of these things, and then being able to do it again. Ends up being a decent amount of card advantage. Probably like a solid cornerstone, like the elemental and the elemental gameplay in here. Eclipsed Elf, triple green-black hybrid. Look at the top 4, Elf, Swamp, Forest. Put your hand, the rest of them by your library. Probably the worst thing about this card is the fact it doesn't put them in the graveyard. High Perfect Morcant, 2 black and a green, 4/4. Whenever it or another elf you control enters, each opponent blights 1. And then you tap 3 untapped elves you control, you proliferate. So whenever another elf you control enters, each opponent ends up blighting 1. They put a counter, a -1/-1 counter on a creature they control. Obviously, if this comes down and you're able to play multiple elves, you're going to be able to put counters on your opponent's creatures, and then they have a question where sure they can like limit the effect of like High Perfect by being able to put multiple counters on a thing. Well, eventually it ends up dying. But if they spread them across, then you have the ability to proliferate, which if you have +1/+1 counters in your creatures, you're going to be able to add those. You're going to be able to add the minus counters and stuff. You're going to make life very difficult for your opponent with this card, especially if you're like in the elves build. And being able to put multiple elves in play means that you're going to be able to put multiple -1/-1 counters on multiple things, and then activate the proliferate multiple times, potentially just killing off a lot of creatures in the process. Lorwyn, Imperfect Naturalist, a double green-black hybrid for a 1/3. When it enters, you mill 4 cards, and you may put a creature or land card from among the milled cards on top of your library. And then for 2 and triple hybrid green-black, you can tap it, discard a land card, create a 1/1 black and green worm creature token for each land card in your graveyard. You'll be able to do the elf thing, but you're not necessarily having to do the elf thing. And I kind of like this card. Seeing a little bit more constructive playability for that reason. I mean, just getting to just mill cards and pick up lands when you need them to, but then just being able to leave the excess in your graveyard. And then also like in conjunction with cards like the Ice Till Explorer, where like you can just play lands, mill cards, and then you're able to like activate this and then make a ton of tokens. And then also, if you're able, again, untap this, generate mana, you're able to then do it again. Like if you ever get to a point where like you can somehow activate this ability twice and you're making a decent amount of worms, you're gonna win the game in no time. Morcant's Loyalist, 1 green and a black for a 3/2. Other elves you control get +1/+1. When this creature dies, you return another target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. So you're essentially going to end up being like neutral-ish on this. You're going to play it. You're going to be able to buff all your dorks. It dies. You're going to be able to get an elf back. Stoic Grove Guide, 4 and a hybrid green-black. You pay 1 and a green-black hybrid. You exile this card from your graveyard, and you make a 2/2 black and green elf creature token. 5 mana, 5/4, not very exciting. Being able to make a token later, a little bit more intriguing, but, you know, overall just kind of like meh on this. Tristan's Command, 4 green-black. Create a token that's a copy of target elf. Return up to 1 or 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. Destroy target creature or enchantment. Creatures target player controls get +3/+3 until end of turn. Untap them. So this has like the most potential to where you could just like make a bunch of mana with your creatures, give them all +3/+3, you know, overrun type of effect. Untap all of them so you can actually attack with them, and then also destroy like a creature to get out of the way, or create a copy of like another elf and potentially get to do that sort of thing. I think this is the most expensive of all the commands, but that's probably fine given the fact that elves usually just end up generating a lot of mana. I think if this was like 3 or 4 mana, you would very easily be able to like end up netting mana and doing sort of the things like that. Bree of Clan Stout Arm, 2 red and a white, 1 and a white, and tap it. Another target creature you control gains flying and lifelink until end of turn. In the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You can cast that card without paying its mana cost. The spell's mana value is less than or equal to the amount of life you gain this turn. Otherwise, put that card in your hand. This card is going to get you card advantage either way, and then obviously you're going to get a lot more if you are able to gain more life. And there's like 30 plus years of life gaining. You can definitely find ways of just making sure that you can either always cast like small things from your deck that are going to have a big impact, or just having absolutely massive spells that you're then going to be able to free cast off of Bree of Clan Stout Arm. Cthulhu's, 4 and a double red-white hybrid. If 2 white spent, you make 2 green and white Kithkin creature tokens. If double red spent, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. So obviously, like, this is probably one of the better ones where if you cast both halves of it, you're feeling pretty good. You know, you're able to potentially put, 4 power. So creatures you control get +1/+1. So you have 4 power, and then you're going to have 2 more 4 power things. So you're going to have like 8 power. Like for 6 mana, you're going to be able to attack for 8 power on like that turn, and you're still going to have 3 bodies left around. It's like pretty good. Like, I think this is like fine to, it's like fine in one way or another, but you're probably better off like the 2 tokens feels better than just giving your things +1/+1 in haste, unless you're at a turn where like you want that kind of effect, of course. Feisty Spikeling, 1 in a hybrid red-white changeling, 2/1, has first strike during your turn. Again, like, not mad at it. It just kind of is what it is. Hovel Hurler, 3 in a hybrid red-white. This creature enters with 2 -1/-1 counters. Double hybrid red and a white. You remove a counter from this creature. Another creature you control gets +1/+0. Gains flying until end of turn. Only activate as a sorcery. Unfortunately, it gives it to another creature. But the fact that you're able to do this twice, you have some pretty big creatures in these red-white colors. You could probably end up getting in massive amounts of damage doing it. Curl, Attentive, first year, 1 and a double hybrid red-white. Tap 2 untap creatures you control. Copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only once each turn. Fine. I mean, there's some pretty good triggered abilities. You're not restricted on like what creatures you can tap. It's just 2 untap creatures. You can even tap the Carol. So, look fine. Like, this ends up being like pretty good if you have some, and not abusable, which is obviously what ends up holding it back the most. But like, just a fine card. Chitinous Grappling, 3/4 for 4, trample reach, or reach changeling, fine. Glister Barn, at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature control gets +X/+X, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Ends up being a 5 mana 1/4. It's okay. Like, really just like giving something +2/+2. Like, I don't know how to feel about this card. I think, like, again, a lot of these you want like to get 3 or 4, or ideally 5, but 3 to 4 is usually like the sweet spot. I think if it's not good at like 3 or 4, then it's not worth trying to get it up to 5. Tam, Mindful, first year, 1 in a hybrid green-blue. Each creature you control has hexproof from each of its colors, and target creature you control becomes all colors until end of turn. So this is like a card that you can give it all colors, and then essentially giving it hexproof, while also, you know, like red creatures and like other green and blue creatures are going to have hexproof from those colors, so they're not going to be able to get bounced. You're not going to be able to target them for, you know, bite spells and things like that. Wistfulness, 3 and a double green-blue hybrid. If double green was spent, exile target creature, or exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. If double blue was spent, cast it, draw 2 cards, discard a card. Again, not mad at it. I'm probably more mad at the alternate art than I am the actual art of this card. Being able to exile an artifact or enchantment and having that flexibility, while also, in the worst case, just being able to, you know, draw 2 cards and then discard a card for 2 blue is, like, also okay. I was thinking for something like Living End, this would be pretty good, because like a 6/5 is like a pretty big body, and then just also having like 2 mana, like draw 2 and then discard a card, help you dig for like your cascade spells, while also being able to put a card in a graveyard. Doran, Besieged by Time, 1 white, black, and green. Each creature you spell you cast with toughness greater than its power costs 1 less to cast. And then creatures, whenever a creature you control attacks or blocks, it gets +X/+X, where X is the difference in its power and toughness. Obviously, with Doran, it's going to be able to attack. It's going to be a 5/5, and then it's also going to give your a discount for like your big butted creatures. You know, so again, incentivized to like have these things that don't have defender, so then you can end up getting in and attacking with them. Marilyn, Fey Ascendant, 2 green, black, and blue. Flying, whenever Marilyn or another elf or fairy enters under your control, exile the top 2 cards of target opponent's library, and once each turn you may cast a spell with mana value less than or equal to the number of elves or fairies you control from among the cards without paying its mana cost. Oh my god, this ends up, I mean, there's tons of ways to make elf creature tokens and fairy creature tokens that you're going to be able to mill your opponent, and then also like cast some pretty big spells. Like if you can cast 1 or 2 spells off of Maryland, I have a hard time believing that you can lose the game. Like actually, like 2 like good spells off of it, I have a hard time imagining you lose the game. Changeling Wayfinder, 3 mana, 1/2. Changeling, when this enters, you search your library for a basic land card, you reveal it, put it to your hand. I really like this over just putting it on top of your library. Just a solid, like, kind of like curve filler, probably more than likely like curve filler / like just you need to like make up spots in your deck. Chronicle of Victory, 6 mana, legendary artifact. You choose a creature type when it enters, and creatures you control the chosen type get +2/+2 and have first strike and trample. And whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, you draw a card. You know, again, like these, like this is fine if you cast like 1 really big creature and you draw a card and you continue to draw cards. And of course, this ends up being like a combo piece if you have a bunch of smaller creatures that you can then play over and over and over again. In Limited specifically, you're probably going to be playing more of these like shapeshifter / like changeling cards. So you're going to be able to get a little bit more out of it because they are going to be cheaper, and, you know, making even like Changeling Wayfinder over here like a 3/4 that allows you to like draw a card when you play it and then search for a basic and then put it to your hand. Like this just ends up netting you 2 cards because of this thing. Ends up being a very solid artifact. Excuse me. Dawnblessed Pennant, 1 mana. When this enters, you choose any one of these creature types. Whenever the permanent you control the chosen type enters, you gain a life, and then you can pay 2 and sacrifice this artifact and return target card of the chosen type from your graveyard to your hand. Again, remembering that there are kindred, instant sorceries, enchantments, artifacts, whatever, that you can then use to pick them up with the Dawnblessed Pennant. Furdok Core, 3 mana, changeling. So this is a shapeshifter artifact. Pick it up off of this pennant. You can pay 4 mana. This becomes a 4/4 artifact creature until end of turn. That ends up being all creature types, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. Fine mana rock. Like a 4/4 for 4 is like not too bad. Just unfortunate it doesn't stay permanent. You have to pay it over and over again to keep getting it. Foraging Wickermaw, 2 mana for a 1/3. This enters Surveil 1. You can add 1 mana of any color. This creature becomes that color until end of turn. You can activate only once each turn. So this is a way that you could like filter through mana to help you cast some of your vivid spells, but then also help you to play some of them. You know, not something that you want to obviously put in your deck purposefully, I would say, but like nonetheless, not bad. Not bad for what it is. Gathering Stone, 4 mana. This artifact enters, you choose a creature type. Spells of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. And when this artifact enters in the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top card of your library. If it's a card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it in your hand. If you don't put the card in your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. So, I mean, like this is like a good way of, you know, for like giants and things like that, even elementals. Like, this is going to make them cheaper while also potentially giving you some card advantage later. Mirror Mind Crown. As long as this equipment is attached to a creature, the first time you create one or more tokens each turn, you may instead create that many tokens that are a copy of equipped creature. I saw like a thing where someone put Mirror Mind Crown on a Academy Rector or Academy Manufacturer and just made tons of Academy Manufacturers and just continued to make even more and more. I can't remember who made the short, but it was incredibly crazy that, you know, after like a few turns, it would be an insane amount of tokens. Puka's Eye, 2-mana artifact. When this enters, draw a card, then choose a color. This artifact becomes a chosen color. Pay 3 mana, draw a card, activate only if there are 5 colors among permanents you control. So this is something that is going to draw a card now, and then also is going to help you with some of those vivid cards. And then also, which, I mean, whatever, like 2 mana to like draw a card of this, probably fine. But if you're able to get all 5 colors, you're rewarded by having an artifact that you can pay 3 mana and draw a card with. No, that's not terrible, I suppose. Rooftop Preacher, 5 mana, 3/3, changeling flying. When this creature enters, you exile 2 target cards from graveyards, and you gain 3 life. Again, fine creature. Like, 5 mana to do this. You know, there are graveyard synergies that we care about, so being able to disrupt those on a creature that has every creature type is kind of nice. Springleaf Drum, you pay 1 mana, tap it, and tap an untapped creature you control, add 1 mana of any color. This is where you can get some value off of those tap creatures that care about tapping. Stalactite Dagger, 2 mana. When this enters, you make a 1/1 color shapeshifter token with changeling. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and is all creature types. The basic lands in the set, I think, look absolutely awesome. Like, get these non-full arts out of my face. We talked about Hallowed Fountain. Apparently there's like 2 sides to some of the, like, that's really interesting. The steam, you know, the shock lands are absolutely amazing. Eclipse Realm enters, choose an elemental, elf, fairy, giant, goblin, kithkin, merfolk, or treefolk, and then you can add 1 mana of any color and spend to cast spells of the chosen type or activate abilities of sources of the chosen type or tap for a colorless mana. And lastly, we have Evolving Wilds. You sack this, search your library for a basic land card, put on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. The Eclipse Realm, you know, is going to help you in those strategies where you want to flip certain cards. You're able to activate those things or activate an ability. I believe that's how that works. Or, you know, just have mana fixing for those things so you can end up casting potentially some like off-color cards. If you're like mainly 2 colors, you know, maybe it can give you like the 3rd one while also supplying the other 2 colors. But yeah, that's the entire Lorwyn Eclipse set. This was probably one of the longest videos I've ever done for this channel. So if you somehow made it this far, congratulations to you. Because I'm surprised I made it. I'm exhausted. My mouth is so dry. We're going to have to find ways to break this up. But, you know, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you somehow made it this far, you know, please leave a like on the video. Comment down below what you're excited for from this Lorwyn Eclipse set. It's going to do it for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. I hope to see you all in the next one.